Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Had an Evil Quirk? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Mom, I'm home. The silence that greets his call is deafening. Izuku can see his mom is home, and yet his yell is only met with an uncaring silence. Izuku kicks off his shoes, placing them carefully in their usual spot, and shuffles his way into the apartment, stopping by the kitchen on his way to his room to grab a quick snack. He grabs the first thing he sees, a shiny red apple, and crunches it in between his teeth, holding it there whilst he carries his bag and holds his bleeding and burnt side, the smell of the burnt flesh still pungent in his nose. As he slowly walks through the house and eats the apple, he looks at all the empty spots where happy family photos used to be, their places being replaced by rectangles of a slightly brighter cream, showing that at least something used to be there, the only sign he was loved at least once in his life. He heaves a sigh as he pushes his door open and flicks the light on, the many faces of All Might facing down on him. Usually it would be comforting, but after a day like his today, he feels ashamed and horribly guilty. The kids at school, they always tried to goad him into using his villainous quirk on them just so they could tattle to the teachers, get him into more trouble than usual. They would taunt him, call him names, insult his mother, punch and kick him and rip up his work and notebooks, and today he slipped. Come on. It wasn't your fault, stupid Deku, they wanted you to do it. They knew what they were doing. You didn't even mean it. He mumbled encouragement to himself, trying to help himself feel better. It wasn't working. Adrenaline was still flooding through his body, making him feel twitchy, like angry bees stinging inside his head. He sighs again as he resigns himself to the painstaking process of trying to undress to treat his wounds. Izuku hisses sharply through his teeth as he tries to strip off his uniform, parts of it stuck to his injuries and the whole thing sticky with half-dried blood. Once he successfully removes it and has his top half bare, he analyzes the burn in his mirror. It goes from his shoulder down to his chest. The wound is nasty, blood bleeding sluggishly from the deeper parts of it, other parts welling up into blisters, fluid filling up in them. As well as that, the burn has dirt and small stones sticking into the wound. He pulls his first aid kit out from under his bed and sits himself on his floor, out of sight of the door so he can clean and bandage himself up and not have to worry about his mom seeing and getting angry that he's using all their first aid supplies again. Izuku cleans up the area around the wound, taking out the parts of his uniform that had melted into his skin and the burns, also removing other things like gravel and dirt. Izuku then pours a healthy amount of cleaning alcohol onto it, biting his lip, and whines in the back of his throat, feeling the liquid pour over the wound as if it's burning him even more. After that, he lets it air out and dry before he applies burn cream and bandages up his torso. He looks at his arms and the smaller cuts and bruises on them and gives them a quick clean-up, disinfecting anything that's bleeding and scrubbing up the blood, grime, and dirt on his body. After he's done, Izuku stretches out his now aching body, the burn feeling as if it was still on fire, the heat radiating out from it, and the other scratches and smaller burns stinging fiercely. Izuku pulls himself up from the floor and swiftly collects the dirty tissues and wipes, throwing them in the waste bin, and then places everything back into his first aid box, sliding it back under his bed. Slowly, Izuku shuffled his way over to his closet, pulling out his favorite hoodie. It was a baggy, bright yellow, put your hands up, radio hoodie, clearly worn down with age, the thick material soft and comforting. He remembers it was one of Present Mick's first pieces of merch that was released. Izuku next grabs some sweatpants and the gloves that his mother forces him to wear everywhere. It's the only thing that she has ever truly forced him to do, keep his skin covered so he doesn't use his evil, villainous quirk on or around her. Ever since it manifested when he was 5, his life completely changed. His deadbeat father left, not wanting an evil child, not wanting anyone to find out what he had a hand in creating, but not without scaring him permanently, the fire burning him until he screamed and cried and begged. All his friends ostracized him, fearing his quirk whilst all thinking him weak and pathetic, beating and bullying him, leaving spider lilies on his desk, writing on it in markers or trying to make him use his quirk to try and get him in trouble. The teachers actively letting, sometimes even encouraging, them to do all this to him. But nothing hurts as bad as how his mother changed. His memories of her from before were so sweet and kind. Loving tunes hummed softly to him to fend off nightmares and lull him to sleep turned into cold shoulders and yelling. Sweet and gentle hugs and kisses on his forehead turned into sharp glares and occasional glass cups and bottles thrown at him with dangerous accuracy whenever he dared show skin in the house. Her cries and shouts of how it was his fault she was so lonely, how it was his fault his father left, it was all his fault. With a sigh, he plugs some earphones into his phone, sliding them into his ears and shuffles his way to the kitchen to grab something to eat, hoping to not encounter his mother and that there will at least be some food in the house he can grab. He rakes through the cupboard, finding some pre-made sachets of miso soup and puts the kettle onto the stove to boil. He also finds microwavable rice that he goes and heats up and some jelly packets, grabbing a couple to snack on later as well, putting them into the pocket of his hoodie. Izuku leans back on the counter and watches the kettle, grabbing it just before it starts whistling, knowing the sound would irritate his mom. He pours the sachets and the boiled water into a small bowl and mixes it well, the rice going into a slightly larger one, and then grabs a glass of water and places it all onto the worn wooden table, inhaling the hot food almost immediately. Izuku sighs and looks forlornly at the now empty bowls, still hungry. He stands and gives everything a clean and leaves the kitchen, hiding back into his room and opens up his laptop. Lately, over the past 2 months, he'd been looking at online schooling. There was one that even had Quirk theory courses. So he decided he would start saving up for them through the odd jobs that he would do around the neighborhood, working every second he possibly could, and he had finally saved enough money to enroll himself. There were so many different courses you could take. There were even 6 different courses on quirks. Quirk evolution, quirk analysis, quirk theory, courses on mental, emitter and mutation quirks, and for the more academic side there were courses like psychology, sociology, intensive English, pre-quirk history. So many cool-sounding courses. Though he was only allowed to take 4 courses at a time according to the website, which SCKD. Izuku bites on his thumbnail as he goes through the pages, processing the payment, and once it's gone through, it asks him which courses he would like to take. He ends up deciding on quirk analysis and theory and also taking the English and psychology courses. As this type of schooling is meant for usually high schoolers to take alongside school, it gave him 4 months to get around halfway through all courses as suggested by the website. Once he's read up on everything he might need to know for the courses, the website takes him to a placement exam to see what level of skill he is currently at for his subjects. He looks at how much time he has for the exam. 3 hours, this shouldn't be too bad. Izuku takes him time, going over each question in his brain and mulling it over before answering, and once he has completed the entire exam, he goes back over his work, double-checking all his answers. Happy with himself and how the exam had at least somewhat settled the adrenaline rushing through his body, he clicks the finished button and looks at how much time he took and stops dead. An hour? How did it only take me an hour? Oh, Cammy, everyone at school is right. I have to be a stupid Deku if it only took me an hour to complete a 3-hour exam. His uneven and broken nails dig into his arm, the familiar rush of adrenaline immediately coming back as he panics. Then his computer chimes with his results and placements for his courses. For his English course, he is placed in an intermediate level course, quirk analysis and advanced course, quirk theory he was placed in the upper intermediate course, and he was placed in the beginner course for psychology. Izuku heaves a sigh. Okay, nothing to worry about then. Just take a couple deep breaths and calm down. He exits the exam results page and returns to the home page, his 4 courses now appearing on the home page. With a sharp and excited smile and the small tendrils of adrenaline still pulsing through his body, he clicks on his first course, an introduction to advanced quirk analysis. Beep. 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 With a flail of his arm, Izuku's hand smacks down onto his phone and shuts off his alarm and groans, lifting his head from where it had fallen onto his laptop's keyboard in his sleep. In the dark screen, he can see some of the characters and keys imprinted into his cheek and forehead, his ears aching and ringing from keeping his old, almost completely broken hearing aids in overnight. He gives his cheeks and forehead a quick scrub with his hands and looks at the time and wants to cry. Every day for the past half a year or so, he had been getting up at 5 in the morning to go on a 3-4 kilometer run, trying to at least prepare for UA somehow. Even though he has a villainous quirk, he's going to keep trying, no matter what his mom or everyone else has said. He had spent almost the entire night on his quirk analysis course, the excitement over everything he could learn, getting rid of the need to sleep as well as the pain still coming from his injuries from the previous day. Izuku has never had the chance to truly work on his analysis skills in an environment where it was encouraged and taught you more skills to better it and such. He couldn't wait to see what the other courses were like too. Izuku drags himself up from his desk, back cracking as he sits up, having been slumped over since he fell asleep 2 hours earlier. Running on 2 hours of sleep. He checks over his bandages, making sure nothing has bled through, and changes into breathable running shorts and a loose, old shirt with vest printed on the front. Izuku peeks out his door, listening to see if his mother was up, but from her missing shoes and coat, she's gone out to work for the day. He lets out a relieved sigh, grabbing a granola bar and scoffing it down quickly before shoving his feet into his running shoes and taking off out the door. The combination of the cool summer morning breeze against his skin and the light pounding of his feet against the solid pavement, slowly turning into dirt as he runs to the forest nearby his apartment, makes him appreciate the early morning. The smell of the trees and dirt soothes his exhaustion, waking him slowly, his eyes widening and becoming more attentive to his surroundings. He looks to the rising sun through the trees as he runs, his destination for his 5-minute rest approaching. Once at his destination, Izuku plops himself down by the streaming river, taking steady, deep breaths, letting his hands dip into the water where tiny little fish dart in between his fingers. He smiles and laughs at the ticklish sensation and wiggles his fingers. He lets himself rest there for a moment and then picks himself back up and continues his run back to his house. As soon as he's through the threshold of the house, he kicks off his shoes and shoots towards the kitchen, yanking open the cupboard that holds the glasses and fills it up with ice-cold water, downing it all in one go, and then proceeds to start choking on it, spilling it everywhere. He refills it and slowly sips at it this time, not wanting to choke again, and cleans up the now wet kitchen counter. He grabs 2 more of the jelly packs and another granola bar for breakfast and slips away into his room to get ready for school. He plugs his laptop onto charge as well and then changes into his gakurin, wiping his body down with a washcloth as he goes, and putting more burn cream on when changing his bandages, not wanting to go to school smelling of sweat but also not wanting to risk a shower just yet with his burn. Izuku puts one of the jelly packs in his bag, as well as his newly started quirk analysis journal, and makes sure he has all of his other journals for school, including Hero Analysis No. And with that, Izuku leaves the apartment, locking the door behind him, and heads off to school. Izuku's day continues. Much the same as every other one at school, the jeering and teasing from his classmates, getting tripped in the hallways, used as a punching bag and quirk testing dummy for whoever feels like it. He even had his lunch that he bought tipped over his head. Thank Kami for his foresight to put at least something to eat in his bag. Izuku sits squashed up in a closet, quietly skiing on the jelly pack he brought with him and writing up more about the villain fight he saw on his way to school today, using his phone's flashlight to illuminate the page. It was MT Lady's debut. So cool. Izuku keeps scribbling down observations about the fight, packing up his notebook as soon as the warning bell rings, and scurrying back to the classroom, keeping his head down and letting himself trip over legs and forcing himself to react to the spider lilies sitting on his desk. Carefully, he picks them up and places them into his bag and sits down, everyone laughing at his slumped shoulders. His heart beats erratically in his chest, butterflies fluttering in his stomach. Just ignore them. You know you can be a hero. What does everyone else's opinion matter anyway? You can be a hero. You can. Izuku takes another deep breath, willing the flutters in his stomach, and closes his eyes, pushing the heels of his palms into his eyes. The rest of the school day goes on much the same, the teacher turning a blind eye to the insults, suicide baiting and teasing, his classmates laughing at him as the teacher calls him out in front of everyone. Oh yeah, Midoriya, you wanna go to UA too, right? Izuku's body freezes up, fear coursing through his veins, his classmates' bloodlust thickening the air as familiar explosions pop on his face, Memories of being held down whilst the loud snap and crackle of them were held next to his now broken ears flash in his mind before he shoves them down. Midoriya? No way. You can't get into the hero course just by studying. Izuku slowly shrinks back into his seat, his cheeks flushing pink with adrenaline and embarrassment as the anxiety takes hold of his body just as Bakugo smashes through his desk with an explosion. Hey Deku, you're below the rejects. You've got a useless villain's quirk. How can you even stand in the same ring as me? Bakugo snarls at him, lips pulled back and showing his teeth as he glares down at Izuku. No, wait, Kaken. It's not like I'm trying to compete with you or anything. Believe me. Izuku this in a breath, it's just that it's been my goal since I was little. And well, I won't know unless I try. He looks downwards at his fidgeting hands. What do you mean unless you try? Are you taking the test for fun? He barks. What the hell can you do? You're useless. Right, everyone settle down now, we need to continue with the lesson. And with that, everyone moves back to their seats. Ignore them, you can be a hero. You can. Izuku keeps that mantra in his head throughout the rest of the afternoon, not letting his thoughts wander from them, needing the motivation to keep himself going. Eventually though, class ends and their teacher dismisses them for the day. Everyone starts packing their things, their chatter drifting around the room. Hey, let's go to karaoke. Sure, nothing better to do. Just as Izuku starts packing up, muttering about the villain fight earlier that morning, his hero notebook is snatched right out of his hands. We're not done talking yet, Deku. Bakugo and his two cronies smile cruelly down at Izuku, his notebook in his hands. Izuku immediately tenses up, watching the three of them with apprehension. One leans over to see the notebook. Katsuki, what's that? He reads the title and then laughs. Huh? Hero analysis for the future? Seriously? Haha. The other boy quickly joins in with the laughter whilst Bakugo's face sours. It's fine, isn't it? Give it back. Izuku goes to reach for the notebook but Bakugo swiftly explodes it. Izuku gasps and bites his lip, willing his tears away, not wanting them to see for more bait. Just ignore it. You can always just rewrite it. Fin. You can be a hero. That's mean. Bakugo then proceeds to throw his notebook out the window, Izuku lunging after it. No. Most top first-string heroes have stories about them from their school days. I want the shine of being able to be called the only student to make it into UA from this mediocre city junior high school. I mean, I'm a perfectionist. Bakugo places a hand on Izuku's injured shoulder and he pushes away his wince at the hand now irritating the injury. Then, sparks snap and crackle at his shoulder, burning him once again, Izuku hissing in pain whilst trying to move away from the hand on his shoulder. So anyway, don't apply to you, nerd. All three of them move towards the door to leave, muttering insults and jeers. If you do want to be a hero that badly, there is a quick way to do it. Izuku looks up, his eyes hesitantly meeting Bakugo. His plain expression turns cruel. Believe that you'll be born with a better quirk in the next life and take a swan dive off the roof. And with those parting words, the three of them leave Izuku alone in the classroom, fresh tears welling in his eyes. Never thought Kaken would ever actually say that to me. Usually it's just everyone else. I guess he really does hate me. Izuku makes his way down the stairs and through the back of the school. Idiot. If I really jumped, that would mean you instigated a suicide. Think before you speak. Izuku spots his notebook in the fish pond, koi fish nibbling away on it. That's not fish food, stupid. He bats the fish away from his book. That's my notebook. He picks up his notebook, stomach sinking with how battered and soaked through it was. Stupid BSTRD. Izuku lets his mind wander, his thoughts drifting over to when he and Kaken were younger, before his quirk manifested, before everyone hated him. Him and Kaken chasing each other around, joined at the hip. He lets himself fall onto autopilot as he walks home, trusting that he'll find his way back to his house without thinking about it. Suddenly, as he goes through an underpass, the sewer grate rattles. A medium-sized invisibility cloak. Izuku turns at the noise, watching green sludge slide out of the sewers and immediately turns to run away and call for help. A villain! Izuku doesn't get too far, The villain immediately grabs him and starts pouring itself into his mouth and nose and down his throat. His fingers claw uselessly at the sludge, the taste sour in his mouth and tears gather in his eyes. Don't worry, I'm just going to take over your body. Izuku struggles even more against the slime. Calm down. It'll only hurt for about 45 seconds. I can't breathe. Adrenaline starts pumping through his body again, making Izuku's head rush. Thanks for your help, you're my hero. But I didn't think that he had come to this city. Izuku struggles harder as his vision starts fading more and more. I'm dying. Am I dying? I'm dying. Somebody. Izuku's arm reaches out for help slowly, and then the sewer grate pops open. It's all right now, young man. Because I am here. Whose? Texas Smash. Izuku's eyes slip open and then close slowly as the sludge is blown away. He drifts away as the large figure who saved him comes closer. Oh, it might? Izuku jolts awake to the feeling of being slapped gently across the face, his eyes squinting in the light. Hey. Izuku looks up. Oh good. I'm glad you're okay. Sorry about getting you caught up in my villain fighting. I don't usually make mistakes like this, but I was in high spirits on my day off in a new place. Izuku's face dawns with realization as he recognizes the face. The man laughs heartily. But you were a big help. Thanks. All Might holds up a soda bottle. I captured him safely. All Might rescued me? Izuku sits up swiftly. Oh, right. An autograph. Where should I my notebook? Izuku flips open the notebook. He already signed it. Izuku stands up, bowing to All Might several times. Thank you very much. It'll be an heirloom, a family treasure. The next few moments go by in a blur and Izuku, in his desperation, grabs onto All Might's leg, eyes closed and body shaking. Eventually, they touch down on a roof in the city. You got this far. Just ask him. Ask him and then you'll really know if you can be a hero. That was scary. Izuku sweats, his fingernails digging into his arms, and he breathes in, rubbing his eyes. Good grief. If you talk to the people downstairs, I'm sure they'll let you down. All Might goes towards the edge of the building. I am seriously out of time, so I really must go. Wait please. Izuku reaches towards him, pleading. No. I will not wait. Izuku thinks back to his mom and Kaken again, the memories flashing beneath his eyelids as he closes his eyes. Even if I have a villain's quirk, can I become a hero? Izuku clenches his fists into the meat of his arms. Can even someone with a villain's power be like you? Izuku opens his eyes again and looks up. Oh my Kami. All Might. Are you okay? Are you injured? I might be able to help. Izuku chucks his backpack from his shoulders, raking around until he grabs onto his first aid kit. I'm fine. It's just an old injury, nothing to be done for it. Izuku looks up, confused. All Might sighs, lifting up his shirt and showing the scar. It's not pretty, is it? I got this scar fighting a villain around 5 years ago now. 5 years ago? He asks skeptically, but there's no way Toxic Chainsaw did that, right? I watched that fight and... I'm surprised that you remembered that. Izuku perks up as All Might chuckles at the fanboy standing in front of him. But no, this was a different villain that I fought to keep under wraps from the public. I ended up losing my stomach and a lung from it. Oh, Izuku's lips tugged down into a frown, stomach sinking from the prognosis. I'm sorry. But as for your question, All Might shifts his stance, his eyebrows furrowing. Between the public and their viewing of quirks, as well as safely using your quirk, do I think you could become a hero with a villain's quirk? No, I don't think you could. All you would end up doing is hurting more people than you save. I see. Izuku's breath hitches and he steadies himself, unwilling to cry in front of the #1 hero. If you want to still help people, you can try to do so in different ways. All Might offers, his shoulders shrugging. You could be a police officer or even a doctor. I know this is probably hard to hear, but you need to have a realistic dream that's actually attainable for you and safe for everyone involved too. Yeah. He chokes out and looks down at the ground again, his heart shattering in his chest, trying to conceal his hurt and not show any of it to his idol. Young man, I have to go take this villain to the police station now. Please don't tell your friends or be posting about my injury online. It could put me and others in danger if you did. At this, Izuku's head shoots back up. Well, of course not. I won't. He confirms as All Might walks to the door, giving Izuku a last look and a departing, "Have a good day, young man," and disappears through the door. The door closes with a loud clang, the tears he was holding back now let free as his knees give out below him. Izuku's body shudders and shakes with heaving sobs and choking breaths. You can be a hero. You can. You know you can. You can. You can. You can't. Izuku's body bends in half with the force of his cries, tears landing on the roof below him, evaporating in the afternoon sun, Izuku's brain shutting down and his cries slowing down. The only noise aside from the hustle and bustle of the city were his quiet sniffles. By the time he snaps back to himself, it's dark out and he's still sitting on the roof, folded in half. He blinks and then rubs away the crusted tears from his eyelashes and lifts himself upright, scanning his view from the roof. I don't know why you're so upset, you stupid, useless Deku. You knew the answer all along. All you did was fool yourself and made it hurt more than it needed to. You're just a useless, delusional Deku. You'll never be a hero. All you'll do is hurt people. His heart squeezes painfully as he looks over to his scattered things, first aid box hanging out of his bag, as well as his notebook. Maybe Kaken's right. Maybe everyone is. What's the point anyway? Not like anyone will miss me. Izuku's fingers clench around his notebook and his pen and opens it to a blank page, writing his last words. I'm sorry that I caused so much pain. He rips out the page and places his scattered items and notebook back in his bag, staring at the red spider lily for a second longer, and lifts it over to the edge with him, placing it by the side, and he slips off his bright red shoes, folding up his letter and placing it in one of them. He steps up on the ledge and turns around to look and make sure that the note won't flutter away. He sighs one last time and shuffles forwards until his sock toes hang over the edge. Looking at the drop from this height was dizzying, the street lights blurring with unshed tears. Izuku clenches his fists and steels himself. And then he lets himself fall. As he tips forwards, light footsteps land on the building, but he hits the ground with a loud crack before they could do anything. Blood seeping out from his broken and still body. And then his eyes snap open. Shota has dealt with a lot of different things when he was patrolling. From drunks fighting in dark alleyways to doing raids for Quirk trafficking rings and drag busts as well, but one thing he'll never numb himself to is the sinking in his gut when he sees someone standing on a ledge. He has just finished de-escalating a gang fight, the police carting off the 5 offenders. He hops back up to the rooftops, listening out and scanning the skyline when his eyes catch a small, hunched-over figure standing on the edge a few buildings away. His heart sinks as he flings himself forwards with his capture weapon, trying to get there before the person jumps. Just as Shota lands on the roof, quiet footsteps touching down as he steadies himself, the person, the kid, he notices with a heavy heart, lets himself fall forwards. Shota shoots out his capture weapon, the fabric just missing the kid's wrist. He throws himself forwards and follows the kid off of the roof, trying to tune out the loud crack of the body hitting the ground. His eyes widen as he takes in the scene. The ground was dented with cracks, looking as if it was a boulder that hit it, not this tiny kid. He watches for a second, blood seeping in the middle of the miniature crater, and then pings for an ambulance, running over to the body to check over for a pulse. He runs his hands down the kid's neck, checking for any kinks. Thank God there wasn't any, even though their head was lolling at an odd angle. He next checks for a pulse, heart sinking as time goes on, and he feels nothing. But in the next moment, he feels a violent fluttering of a too fast heartbeat against his finger, and the kid's eyes snap open and the body shoots up. Whoa, kid! Shota tries to get the kid to slow down, his capture weapon fluttering out as the kid shoots forwards and smacks himself into a pole and then runs away, disappearing off into the distance, giving Shota not even a chance to chase after them. Shota stands, shocked, for a few seconds and surveys his surroundings of the mini crater and now a folded-in-half pole. A loud clang breaking the silence as it falls to the ground. What the F dash? As Izuku runs, his body feeling as if it was sparking like a live wire, he tries to take in his surroundings and slow his pace down. Oh Kami, I'm about to fall, oh god. Izuku lands with a thump in soft sand, his heart racing so fast and hard it feels as if it is bruising his ribs. His eyes flicker around wildly, taking in his surroundings. He's on a beach, trash piled high in almost every spot of sand and the smell of garbage pungent in the air. It feels as if his gaze has sharpened, everything looking so much clearer, smells much stronger and his ears ringing loudly, able to hear the static crunching from his hearing aids as he rips them out and turns them off, taking a deep breath as he shoves them in his pocket. Izuku looks down at the small hole he created in the sand from his impact, pushing himself up only for him to rocket forwards and land with his head buried in the sand wall he created. Sheet! He pulls himself away and spits the sand that got into his mouth. Ew! That's so gross. Where the hell am I? This time, taking it slowly so he doesn't land buried head first in the sand again, he pushes himself up and out of the hole and gazes around again. Dogoba Beach. Okay. The moon softly illuminates the water and Izuku suddenly wishes he could see what the beach looks like without the trash but resigns himself to the fact he should get himself home, kicking sand up on his way to the stairs with his shoeless feet, limping. His neck keeps slumping forwards, as if it was unable to hold the weight of his head and he can see his wrist twisted and bent at a wrong angle. He squints his eyes and grimaces at the sight, using walls of buildings and such as a crutch as he stumbles around. Izuku can still feel his heart racing, feeling as if it was crawling up his throat, his saliva sticky as if he hadn't drank anything for a while, which he hasn't. Not since lunch earlier that day, and it was now late at night. He looks up at his apartment building, staring at the raised fire escape he'd need to climb to get in unnoticed, taking a few steps back in the process. Izuku takes a deep breath in and steels himself for the jump, imagining that it would be difficult for his smaller size to reach, only for him to shoot up off the ground with unimaginable height and speed. No, this is now a problem for the Izuku of tomorrow. I'm so tired. Izuku wiggles his way through the half-closed window to his room, grabbing the half-drank water bottle on his desk and finishing it quickly before sliding onto his bed. Thank Kami I don't have school tomorrow. And then, with that last thought, he passes out. Yet oh god, Izuku whines, pain shooting throughout his body as he wakes up, bleary-eyed. Hesitantly, he levers himself up on his bed and looks down, seeing dry and sticky blood pooled on and around him. What the hell? His wrist was twisted awkwardly, but somehow looking better than last night, in a position that definitely meant it was broken, his leg heavily bruised and aching in a way that indicated it was broken as well. The tangy and metallic taste of blood strong in his mouth. Izuku grabs onto his desk to help assist him in getting up, the world spinning violently and nausea burning up his throat that he determinedly swallows down and hobbles his way into the bathroom after grabbing fresh pajamas, leaning heavily on the walls of the house, not noticing the smear of blood that follows. His heart beats erratically, speeding up and slowing down over and over again, causing his gut to twist with anxiety as he steps into the bathroom to look into the mirror and immediately freezes. Almost all Izuku's visible skin is covered with dry, flaking blood, mostly all coming from his head, his curls coated thickly with it. His gakuren is ripped and crumpled, also coated with an unhealthy amount of blood. Inspecting himself closer, Izuku notices dark green speckles in the blood as well, rubbing some of it off of his cheek with his thumb. He shifts forwards and leans over and into the shower, turning it on and to its highest heat setting, resigning himself to the fate of irritating all of his wounds. After discarding his uniform into the wash basket for himself to deal with later, hearing aids placed on the counter, and removing his bloodied and dirted bandages, throwing them into the waste bin, he grabs onto the wall for support and lifts himself over the bathtub. He hisses in pain as he places all his weight on his broken leg to allow himself to clamber into the shower. Once in the shower, Izuku turns himself around so he's under the scalding spray of the water, sighing in relief, watching the water swirl a bright pink as all the blood washes away down the drain in a morbid fascination. He decides to start cleaning his body first, just knowing that his curls will be impossible to deal with, especially with the unknown head wound. Izuku takes his time scrubbing the blood from his entire body, making sure there isn't anything hiding in any creases or under his fingernails, slowly getting more and more nauseous as time passes. His vision starts spinning to the point he lets himself sit on the floor of the bathtub, breathing heavily with his hand clenched over his mouth, swallowing down the bile. Izuku, noticing his skin is as good as he's currently able to get it, he picks himself up to stand briefly and lets himself sit back down on the floor of the shower, grabbing the detachable shower head with his uninjured arm before he goes down and starts gradually getting through washing his curls, wetting them and using his hurt wrist as little as possible as he does so, the water turning a bright pinky red color. Izuku lets a pained choke slip out his mouth as the water hits wherever on his head he had injured himself, the water causing the wound to burn with pain. He turns the water away from his head and tries to blink away the tears, some of them mixing with the now fresh trails of bloody water down his face, the water having washed away what little healing his head had done. Izuku leans over the bathtub, grabbing one of his older, rattier towels and holds it to his head, putting pressure onto the, from what he can tell, rather large split. I should really go to the hospital for this. But then they'd start asking questions. And we don't have enough money for that. God damn it. Izuku lifts the towel away after holding it there, giving up on washing the rest of the blood out of his hair. He had cleared away most of it a ways, before he reopened the wound. Using the bathtub as leverage, he pulls himself up and over the bath again, landing on the towel he had laid out for himself before the shower, grabbing one of the towels on the towel rack next to him, continuing to sit on the ground as he dries himself, not ready to brave the nausea and pain and dizziness that comes with standing up. Once relatively dry and after he smeared burn cream on and replaced the bandages, along with tightly wrapping his wrist, Izuku, with a great amount of difficulty and effort, shimmies himself into the sweats and hoodie he had grabbed, sliding on his gloves as well and exhales, puffing his cheeks out proudly. Now that he feels as if he has some semblance of his life in control, he stands up by pushing off the bath again, putting all his weight on his better leg and closes his eyes as the world spins violently. Izuku reaches out blindly, grabbing his hearing aids and putting them back in his ears and turning them onto a low setting so he doesn't make his now growing headache worse than it will be. Izuku takes each step towards his room with careful, deliberate steps, freezing when he sees his blood smeared against the wall he's leaning on. Oh no! With quickening steps, he stumbles his way back into the bathroom, each breath feeling as if he is not skiing in enough air as his heart starts beating rapidly in his chest again, trying to not imagine what his mom would do to him if she found out. Izuku fumbles, finding some generic disinfectant wipes and grabbing a handful, stumbling back towards the bloodied walls, awkwardly walking on his hurt leg, making him curse as he starts scrubbing at the wall. Come on, get off! He hisses at the wall, leaning against it heavily, the blood fading away with his vigorous scrubs to the wall. Thankfully, it wasn't too difficult to wipe away and Izuku rests his head against the wall, which now sports several slightly clearer patches and smears due to the wipes getting rid of the worn-down color, refreshing it, and allows his heart rate to settle back down before he notices the pain shooting through his leg from twisting it in his rush to clean up. After taking a minute to stew in his misery, Izuku moves away from the wall and makes his way gradually towards his bedroom. Opening the door, he groans dejectedly at the sight of his bed, having forgotten about the mess of his ruined bedsheets. Deciding that it's a problem for himself later on, he wobbles his way to his desk and decides to just focus on some of his work, promptly remembering his bag with all his stuff was left on the rooftop. You're kidding me. What is this bullshit? He lets his head fall forwards, the weird lull in his neck making it slump forwards, his neck feeling weirdly numb. He gives it a couple pokes, squinting at the feeling. Izuku eventually just grabs one of his spare, empty notebooks and starts up on a different course so his notes aren't disjointed and eventually settles on the psychology one, rather curious about it. He briefly wheels over to his bed, finding a cozy blanket in the corner of it that somehow was untouched by the blood and drapes it over his shoulder and wheels back over, settling himself in for some studying. After a full day's rest, letting himself get lost in the strangely interesting world of psychology, and as good as a couple bigger meals as he can make and stomach, plus a full night's sleep, he wakes up to his 5 Alarm, feeling refreshed and almost like he was never hurt in the first place. His headache is still pounding away, but the shooting, burning pain in his leg and wrist has faded into a dull ache, deep purple and black bruises fading to a sickly green-yellow color. Izuku shifts himself out of bed, deciding to risk going on a shorter run than usual, still wanting to get out for the fresh air. He quickly follows his usual morning routine, the aching of his leg and wrist sometimes making him pause, but it was nowhere as bad as it was the previous day. He once again changes the bandages on his chest, noting how they seem a lot better, and then leaves for his run, only stopping back at the apartment to get his stuff for school. The next week continues much the same, waking up at 5, going for a run, and then going to school. He even found the building he jumped off of and retrieved his, thankfully untouched, stuff from the top, glancing at the crater he left when he landed and the missing light pole with an awkward air around him. By the time that a week has passed, his bruises have gone and his aches and pains have faded completely. His head still feels as if it were too heavy for his neck to hold up, and he still has an aching in his head, but compared to the pain of his head the day after, the pain wasn't anything. Izuku's day so far had been following along the same routine. He had his run, went to school, somehow avoiding Bakugo and his lackeys, and, in some sort of, "I'm sorry for the sheet I put you through," he had somehow avoided getting beat up in the past week. But of course that doesn't last. As Izuku slugs his way to the back of the school for the less populated exit that he usually leaves from, it's not a massive surprise when someone grabs him by the arms from behind, dragging him into the disabled toilets. "Ah, hey Deku, it's been a while, hasn't it?" There were 3 boys that Izuku, somewhere in his mind, could recognize but couldn't remember any of their names for the life of him. Yeah. So we thought it might be fun to use this opportunity to relieve some anger. Another smiles cruelly at him, flexing his fingers. The next thing he knows, he gets a punch to the gut, winding him. Punches after punches rain down on him until he's on the floor, wheezing, but they just switch to kicks to his face, chest and stomach instead, not giving him any chance to breathe. Stop. Stop. Izuku reaches a hand out, trying to pull himself away, but one of the boys stomps on it, the bones crunching sickeningly, and Izuku sobs in pain. Then, his arms are getting held behind his back by 2 of the boys and his gakurin hanging open, the boy who dragged him in there kneeling in front of him with a small knife held in his hand. He smiles sadistically at Izuku as he thrashes against the arms holding him down. Now, quit struggling. How about we have some more fun? Make sure you'll always know who and what you really are. Izuku shakes his head, chest heaving. No. Stop it. He cries, heart pattering harshly in his chest as the knife touches down on his skin, deeply cutting into his flesh as the boy carves "death" into his stomach in big block letters, blood pooling beneath him on the bathroom floor sluggishly. Once the boy finishes up, he gives the knife a clean and nods his head towards the door as the 2 holding Izuku him down let him fall and smack his head against the floor and leave Izuku in the bloodied toilets alone. But then, Izuku's vision sharpens. The metallic smell of the blood on the floor and the tangy taste of it in his mouth gets so much stronger. His eyes flicker rapidly around the room, glowing eerily, the pain of his injuries fading away, and he flings himself upward so he can stand. He stumbles around, unused to the speed he was moving at and the strength his body suddenly gained along with the heightened senses. Feeling the need to get the hell out of the building, he grabs his bag and rips open the door, almost tearing it off its hinges, and runs away with one specific destination in mind. Izuku collapses in soft sand as soon as he reaches Dogoba Beach, not even winded from the 20 minutes run. His body feels as if he has taken some sort of energy drink that had several shots of espresso in it, time seeming as if it had slowed down whereas Izuku has sped up. Izuku's eyes scan over the beach, searching for something nice and sharp. If he thinks about how he was the night after he had jumped, he was injured to the point he was surprised he hadn't died. And now, just after being beaten to a pulp, it feels almost the same, the only difference being he doesn't feel as erratic and fast as he had compared to that night. So, on the run to the beach, he thought up a couple conspiracies and ideas on what was happening. A bright glint in the sand catches Izuku's eyes and he speeds over in seconds, picking up a shining pocket knife, delicate blue swirls carving into a white handle, looking like little clouds, and a sharp blade that can twist back into the handle. Izuku flicks the knife out and examines the blade for rust. Finding none, he takes a deep breath, eyes honing in on his wrist. I can't believe I'm about to do this. He places the blade to his wrist, digging the blade deep as he slashes 3 deep cuts across his wrist. The pain he braces for doesn't come, and his gaze noticeably changes again, as if it were widening for him to be able to take more information around him in. Izuku pockets the knife and walks steadily over to a large fridge laying next to a trash pile, closes his eyes and punches as hard as he can, his fist landing with a loud thunk. And when he opens his eyes again, they're immediately drawn to the massive indent now in the fridge, his knuckles reddening from the punch. I need to experiment. How do you even test something like this? Izuku sits in the sand of Dagoba Beach, the fresh cuts on his arm flowing a steady amount of blood as he ponders on different ideas. It seems to be some sort of enhancement quirk, possibly triggered by injuries? He pulls on his fingers, body twitching from the lack of estimulation, enhances sight, taste, smell, and I'm assuming it would enhance hearing as well. He switches off his hearing aids and picks up a rock, throwing at the dented fridge, hearing a quiet clink as the rock hits its target. Enhances my hearing somewhat, as much as it can for someone who's almost completely deaf, I suppose. It also definitely makes me stronger and faster. The more injured I get, the stronger each enhancement becomes. Izuku stares back down at the knife contemplatively before picking it back up and slashing a few more deep cuts into his arm, unbothered as his already wildly beating heart speeds up more in his chest. He rockets back up, wobbling in place as he tries to keep his balance. That's something I'll have to get used to definitely. My strength and speed really keep surprising me. He walks over to the fridge again, giving it another punch, this time breaking through the metal. Okay, definitely to do with injuries. But in what way? Izuku paces across the sand, his muttering even more difficult to follow along to, too, speaking at speeds much faster than he usually does, even when he mutters. His hand taps against his leg idly as he continues his thoughts. I'll have to find a way to measure everything, though I'm not too sure how I'll do that with my senses. Maybe my reflexes are enhanced as well, because of the sight. Izuku sits himself back on the ground and looks up. I don't think I can accurately test anything just now in this state. Maybe I can try to come back here tomorrow if I don't feel as bad as I did last time. With that plan in mind, he takes a couple minutes to steady his breathing, feeling as if he couldn't catch a breath or get rid of the anxiety fluttering in his stomach, his hands clammy in his gloves, and then stands back up, ready to make 15-minute walk back to his house, making sure his injuries are sufficiently covered and his new knife safely tucked away. Using the same method as before, climbing through the window and landing softly on his bed, he slides onto the floor and rushes for the shower, making sure to open doors gently to avoid breaking them, wanting to get cleaned up and patched up before he starts feeling pain again. He swiftly showers, getting rid of any sweat, grime and blood, and steps out just as quickly. Even though he had cleaned away all the dry blood, the fresh cuts still bleed steadily as he throws on a tank top and shorts, not wanting to get blood on any of his clothes, and peeks out the bathroom door, looking left and right whilst trying to listen out for his mother as much as he can with his ears the way they are. Seeing no sign of her, he walks swiftly into his room, closing his door behind himself and leaning against it with a relieved sigh. He crouches down to the floor and pulls out the first aid kit and gets to work on tightly bandaging his arms and the carved-out words on his stomach, trying not to look at them as much as possible. When he's finished up, all the bloodied materials and such in the trash and first aid kit back under the bed, he slumps against the floor, trying to swallow back his nerves. Izuku, even on a good day, is generally an anxious person, but never has it ever been to this extent. It feels as if his heart is trying to beat out of his chest, his stomach in his throat and his hands shaking and sweating no matter how much he wipes them off. It's like this feeling of dread has just settled into his stomach and won't let go. This was on some new level. Usually there would be something to trigger it. His room was his safe space, a place in which his anxiety and any other problems would just fade away, not linger, festering under the surface. His breath stutters and he rubs the heels of his palms into his eyes, trying to rid himself of the feeling. The next thing he knows, his body is shivering and jitters run up and down his spine, teeth chattering together even though he isn't cold. Izuku slides his pillow off of his bed and into his lap, burying his head into it and wrapping his arms around it, trying to soothe himself, fingernails trying to scratch its skin beneath bandages. He stays in that position the rest of the night, curled tightly around the pillow, falling asleep in the early hours of the morning. Izuku ends up jerking awake to his alarm going off, eyes popping open, and as soon as his body moves, automatically going to turn off the vibrating alarm that sits against his thigh, the beeping sounding distant even with his hearing aids in. He hisses in pain, arms aching. With the pain comes the memories of the previous day and his possible discovery. The potential to be a hero with a quirk that's actually useful, that can be used to save people. He smiles to himself through the pain, the thought brightening his mindset from his troubled thoughts and anxiety. He pulls himself up from his floor, pushing through the aches and pains from the bruises on his body, and changes into more athletic wear to prepare for his day. Once again, thanking someone from above that today was a day he didn't have school so he could just focus on his quirk. When Izuku leaves his room, looking out for his mother, he notices a note left on the kitchen counter. Away for business. Don't call or text. Or get yourself into trouble again. Wow. Thanks, Mom. He TSKS at the note and packs himself a couple of water bottles and a light lunch, snacking on an apple and granola bar before he leaves. At least I have the house to myself and don't have to worry as much. He shoves his shoes onto his feet, bags slung over his shoulders, food, medical supplies, and a fresh notebook inside, ready to be filled with new information solely about his quirk. Closing the door, he smiles excitedly, running down the steps of the building and sets off towards the beach. Izuku esses in a deep breath, heart back to pounding in his chest, cuts scattered down his arms, vision bright and enhanced, even in the pale moonlight that shines on the beach. Maybe I should invest in something to measure my heart rate. This really doesn't feel normal. His hearing aids had been taken out as well, wanting to see how far he could push himself, see if he could get to the point where he might not need them anymore. So far, he had measured his strength and speed, starting off with minor injuries and how and if they affected him, working himself up to deeper ones. At this point, he has figured out that it is definitely the injuries causing the enhancements. The more his body is injured, especially if he bleeds, the stronger he becomes. Though he has yet to determine what exactly causes it, leaving him completely in the dark about that aspect of his quirk. Though it was far more morbid than he used to be, he relishes in his newfound abilities that hurting himself is giving him. His eyes adjusting perfectly to the darkness, the strength allowing him to lift cars when he's more majorly injured, even the smaller enhancements that come with the small injuries like the better sight and such. Being able to control so many things gives him so much more power than he's ever had before, a level of control he's never experienced in his lifetime. For once he can choose. He can choose how fast he wants to be, how strong he can be. He can even get back something he thought he'd never have again, even though his hearing would only hit a certain point, only ever hearing the bare minimum, but it was just so much more than he was used to. Though he really wasn't enjoying what seemed to be the drawbacks to his quirk. Shaking and sweating, his anxiety rising, giving him shot-out nerves, he's also assuming that it's also affecting his heart rate as well from how fast it was beating. Izuku stretches his body out and checks the time, eyebrows rising in surprise at the late hour. He had left his house around 5:15 this morning and it was now just about to hit 11 p.m. so Izuku decides that it's probably time to start fixing himself up and packing his stuff away. Izuku slings his bag over his shoulders after patching up his arms and starts to make his way to his apartment through the quiet streets. It is always strange to walk at night through them, so used to the loud hustle and bustle around him whenever he is in this area, it makes something in his gut churn. Or maybe it was just the drawbacks of his quirk again. Or maybe it could be the yelling in the alleyway that he's just about to pass. Izuku freezes in place and quietly turns up the volume of his hearing aids. Come on, stupid beach. Be quiet. A man grunts and a woman sobs at his words. Just stay the hell still. It's your fault that Kurata lost the Trigger deal and got arrested. Trigger? What the hell is that? Please stop. Please. The woman cries and Izuku can't just stand there and do nothing, he just can't let this happen. And so before he even can think, he runs into the alleyway, pushing past the oblivious man who was obviously meant to be watching out for people, him being too busy smoking to notice. Hey! Let her go! Izuku stops near the man and the woman. The man's frame towers over her smaller one, makeup-stained tears on her cheeks as she's stuck against the wall of the alley, the man pushing himself against her. Izuku squints his eyes in the light, the man looking very familiar to him, and he tries to remember where from, but nothing clicks. What the hell are you doing here, kid? Oi, Ikari. You were meant to be keeping watch. The man growls and then smiles suddenly. Then, before Izuku realizes what is happening, the other man, Ikari apparently, goes to grab Izuku's wrist, but Izuku grabs the other man's first, going to push him away, but as he does, he remembers his quirk is still active and watches as the man smacks against the wall and knocks himself out against it. Oh my Kami! I didn't mean to do it that hard, that was a total accident, I'm sorry. Well, not real dash. In his own flailing panic, he doesn't notice the other man showing up behind him and smacks the man in his face with one of his erratically moving arms. The man goes flying and smacks his body into a dumpster, the lid crashing closed with the man inside of it. Oh God! Izuku covers his face with his hands. That was a total accident. And then he remembers the woman. Oh miss. Are you okay? Did they hurt you at all? I don't know. She looks up at him, teary-eyed. You just saved me. Thank you so much, you're my hero. She bows to him and Izuku waves his hands frantically. No. It's okay, you don't need to bow. I just did what anyone would do. Izuku smiles at her, his hands splayed out in front of his body, placatingly. That's a lie, most people would just walk away and ignore it. But still, thank you. And then, what has just happened strikes Izuku and he stops in his place. Oh my God. I need to go. I'm going to get arrested for vigilantism. Izuku runs out of the alleyway, calling out as he runs, please call the police. And be safe. Izuku makes it home in no time at all with his quirk. He rushes to his apartment and opens the door, nice and gently as he does not want to rip it off the hinges. Izuku stops by the kitchen and makes himself a quick dinner, just miso and rice. His cooking skills really don't allow for much else, and then returns into his room. He looks at his desk and sees his laptop sitting there and clicks it on, his online schooling popping up. And then his eye catches something in the corner. They had started doing full-time schooling online. Maybe, if he can just transition to online school. It would free up a lot more of his time and he would never have to step foot in that hellhole ever again. And he'll also be able to train more and whenever he wants. And with that plan in mind, Izuku starts collecting all the documents he'll need to get and or give to the principal at Aldra. Izuku, in his excitement, wakes up even before his alarm. Or it's possibly because of the horrible aching of his arms and body after his escapades from the previous day of training and experimenting with his quirk. After his run, he gathers up all his papers and places them in a folder in his bag, his mother's forged signature in a neat print wherever needed, and he heads out towards his school, his stomach fluttering with nerves. The whole process ends up taking not even 10 minutes. The principal goes through the bare minimum with him, the man's nervous demeanor causing Izuku to be rather confused. Usually the man was just as cruel to him as the other teachers, so it makes no sense for him to be so nervous. It isn't until he leaves the school for the final time that he recognizes him as the man in the alleyway and wonders how on earth he wasn't arrested. It was safe to say that Izuku was thriving in online schooling. It was so much better than having to deal with his classmates' and teachers' hatred for him day to day, and it allowed him to be able to learn at a speed that better suited him as well. Since moving to his online schooling full-time, as well as having the 4 courses he chose to take, he also was taking Japanese, maths, and a course about computer sciences and hacking, which was proving to be really interesting, learning more of the scientifics of things like hacking. Izuku was clicking through on his quirk analysis course. Noticing that there was an exam up for him to take as he clicks onto it, he pauses. Quirk analysis final exam. Final exam? Wait, hold on a second. Izuku went back to his previous page and into his course progression, eyes widening. Quirk analysis course, 99% complete. Level upper advanced. Take the final exam? Blankly, Izuku stared at the screen before going back into the final exam page, deciding to try and take all the time he could. There's no way he could have finished the entire course this quickly, right? There either has to be more of the course or he was just more stupid than he thought he was. Several hours passed and Izuku, after checking all his answers for the third time, pressed submit and sat on his chair, confused. If he only took a few weeks to finish the entire course of work, how far through was he with his other lessons? At least, he supposed, it meant he had room for more lessons. He sighed as he stood up, checking the time and noticing it was time for him to leave for Dagoba. Izuku packed his usual bag for it, the food, medical supplies and notebook, and headed out, running to the beach. Izuku looked out at the beach, holding a bloodied bandage against his arm, once again wishing that he could somehow go back in time and see how it looked before it became somewhere where people just dumped their trash. He plopped himself down onto the sand, leaning backwards to stretch his back as he looked out at the moon as he pondered over an idea. Realistically, with his quirk, it couldn't possibly take too long to clean the beach, right? And it would be good for buffing up and to let himself adjust to his speed and strength when his quirk is active. Izuku stood up and headed over towards the trash and thought about how to go through with this. He'd need the resources to get the heavier things moved away, so he would probably have to get in contact with a company that specifically dealt with that sort of thing, as well as durable trash bags and even more durable gloves than he already had, making sure he doesn't touch anything gross and also to avoid getting cut by rusted metal or glass. Just because he hurted himself for his quirk doesn't mean he wanted to use things to cut himself when he didn't know where they had been. With that in mind, he left the beach, ready to return the next day with all the supplies in mind and hopefully with a way to transport all the other stuff that he couldn't move out in public without a lot of stairs. And the possibility of getting arrested. Izuku walked down the dark streets, his hearing aids turned up in volume. Ever since that night when he encountered his old principal attacking someone, he had been on high alert, both looking for him and also wanting to avoid the man, Principal Matsuno, spotting and therefore recognizing him. Izuku had even tried to go to the police about it, but as soon as they saw his quirk and the incident report on his file about it, holding out a hand to help up a friend who had fallen over, as soon as their skin touched, all there were screams and blazing heat, the smell of burning flesh permeating the air. They just told him to get out, that making up stories like that could get him in big trouble. Honestly, all Izuku wanted to do right then was just get home so he could study some more. He was really getting into psychology, finding out about so many different things. They were even about to move on to how you can weaponize it as well. Something like that could be useful against villains. But of course, Izuku gets no luck with his wish. Have you got the stuff? Laced with what I asked. Izuku froze and pushed himself up against the wall by the alleyway, listening in on the conversation. I've got 6 doses of trigger, each laced with a couple of drops of arsenic, should get rid of who you're wanting it to, nice and easy. Izuku slammed a hand against his mouth. Arsenic. And there's that other one again that his old principal was going on about, trigger. What even was that? All he knew was that it sounded bad and he needed to stop them from selling it on and giving it to people. He was going to have to see if he can look up trigger when he's back home though. Izuku sneaked around the corner of the alley, his improved vision allowing him to see a lot more than most others could. Izuku's eyes caught onto something shining in the corner of his vision and spotted a metal bat, smiling at his luck. His heart pounded in his chest, well, pounder faster than it already was as he silently picked up the bat. He took a few slow, deep breaths and just as the 2 men who were dealing relax, going to hand over the metallic suitcase and money alike, Izuku striked. Neither of them had any chance of defending themselves against Izuku. With his speed and strength and the fact the men were not very well built or bulky, they both went down easily. Izuku looked around and eventually found some zip wires in a bunch together and used them to tie up the men. He took his notebook out of his bag and wrote a little note, hesitating on what to sign it with, until he decided on a name. Found these 2 talking about something called trigger. Said it was laced with arsenic, so have a gift. Kindest regards. Adrenaline, smiley face. Izuku smiled at the note and got to work dragging the 2 bodies along to the police station. Thankfully nobody saw him do this, and if they did, they didn't care. It was a different station from the one he went to before, and dumped the 2 men and briefcase on the ground, knocking loudly on the door. He quickly ran behind a bush and watched as a police officer with a cat mutation quirk came out the door, shocked at the 2 unconscious men tied up, and the cat man looked at the note, his eyes widening as he called out for someone. 2 men, one with a plain beige trench coat and hat and the other in all black with a long scarf. Izuku is jerking upwards, heart beating erratically as he runs into a light pole. Kid. And Izuku squints at how the man with the scarf is familiar to him. Izuku only left his hiding spot after the 2 men and briefcase were taken away and the 3 men who dealt with it went inside. He ended up sprinting the entire way home, once again up the fire escape, and took a big breath in. That was insane. It had been about 3 months since that night, and Izuku had learned a lot of stuff about a lot of different things. He completed several more of his courses. He knows a very large amount about psychology, including things like psychological warfare. That was definitely a fun topic to learn about, and he also did a course on sociology too. He completed his computer science and hacking course and was pretty advanced at hacking. It turned out to be a surprising favorite of his. Izuku also became almost completely fluent in his English and was now taking an Italian and JSL course since he had the time, and well, he was deaf. And of course, in the last 3 months, he completed all of the Quirk courses too. But that was only what he had learned through online school. It didn't touch on the things he learned about his Quirk, his name that he chose that day being far more ironic than he meant. He had also learned about the world of the underground. Back alleyway deals, shady trades and secrets, neutral gray areas to trade said secrets for more information or favors, a place where everyone from everywhere coexisted. And in that, he has devoted a lot of time in figuring out about Trigger and how dangerous it really was. He could just tell he was on the cusp of something. He had also learned of ways to hurt himself the quickest to make his Quirk activate, hurting himself just the right amount, which made so many things easier. Though he had yet to figure what to say if someone saw him when he tried to activate his Quirk. That would be an ugly mess. And with all that happening, he had become rather popular, you could say, with the police. In between his schooling, he would work in shady deals for information to take down more Trigger deals, learning about street fighting and how to fight dirty, and carting the criminals he fought off to the police station, and all the Quirk training he had committed to cleaning the beach, making leaps and bounds with his progress in both cleaning it and bulking himself up. Though, with all the good things, there were also the bad things that he was learning. The death rates that kept spiking with the people taking Trigger. The police should really up the security on their computers. It was like they were asking to be hacked. What was he supposed to do? He learned of the horrible things that happened at night and how it felt to feel as if you couldn't save someone properly. Not to say that he has seen anyone die, but he's comforted crying women in dark alleys before, covering them up as best he can until the police arrived. He's had to patch lonely kids up who have been beaten half to death because of things like Quirk status. And one of the worst things he's learned about is the feeling of addiction. He always kept his knife with himself now, both addicted to the sharp pain of the blade slicing through his skin and the feeling of having his Quirk active and rushing through his system. He's addicted to the fast racing of his heart, the blood that pours slowly down skin and the nips of pain that stay until his Quirk activates, only to return the next day. And he kept doing it, even when it's not needed. Izuku stretched his arms upwards, cracking his knuckles and back as he sighed. He had finally committed to finishing his Japanese and maths courses, no matter how boring they were, and he was just glad it was over. He leans over and takes a swig of water and a handful of the gummy sweets next to his laptop, idly humming along to the song currently playing on Put Your Hands Up radio. He had a few emails to go through, most of them being people getting in contact for information about this, that or other. Izuku, known as Adrenaline to everyone in the underground and in the police force, was mostly a vigilante that would, very occasionally, take jobs from people requesting help, but he was also someone who had started to rise in the ranks within informants, people being willing to spill their guts to the sweet-sounding vigilante. Well, until he had made a name for himself. Now he just manipulated his way into getting people to give him information. Again, Izuku is so very glad he took both psychology and sociology. He wouldn't be anywhere as good without those lessons under his belt. He scrolled through his emails, reading up on meeting places for a couple of different people wanting to hire him. He mostly gets odd jobs every now and then, not very often, to do things like get information or to help deal with bad situations or scare people away from someone. His ads on the underground web made it very clear that he would not do anything to initiate violence or do anything illegal past vigilantism. He wanted to be a hero and he definitely didn't want to hurt people. That would be very counterproductive for him if he was to do things like that. And then one email caught his eye. The name in the email grabbed his attention and made his eyebrows rise into his hairline. Eraserhead@heromail.com. 2. New adrenaline@heromail.com. Subject: a meeting. Adrenaline. It has come to my attention that you have much knowledge about a case I am working on. It would be appreciated if we were able to schedule a meeting about this subject matter on your own terms. Eraserhead. Izuku's stomach fluttered with excited butterflies. Eraserhead. Eraserhead wanted to meet with him? So cool. Despite taking down a lot of his hero merch, almost all of his All Might stuff, there were certain things he couldn't get rid of. Mostly things like hoodies and clothes, but a few figures and a couple posters stayed, but there was one thing that he'll never allow himself to throw out. On the floating shelves nailed into his wall sits a sloppily made replica of Eraserhead's goggles. That was all he really knew of the pro, that his quirk was non-physical erasure type and that he used goggles to hide where he was looking, and he had a strange bandage-like material that floats and twists around him. Izuku cracked his fingers as he typed up a reply. To eraserhead@heromail.com. From new adrenaline@heromail.com. Subject: R.E. A meeting. Hi Eraserheadson. I would love to meet with you. I do have a sneaking suspicion on what it is you wish to talk about, so I can bring my notes, depending on what price you're wanting to pay for this info. And this really better not be a trap. Do the police really want a reminder of what happened last time? But please let me know when is best and we can arrange a time and place. Kindest regards, Adrenaline. Let it be known that Aizawa Shota loved his job, both of them, but sometimes they could both cause him far too much stress and frustration. Shota was definitely having one of those moments right then. He sat at his kotatsu with his workout before him, so many different files of things to do with Trigger. Alley deals, deaths, records of the people who have dealt it and that have taken it and survived as well. It wasn't like it was a drag that killed people, that was the weird part. For some reason, a handful of the people taking it seemed to just drop dead and it was throwing everybody off kilter. But in the center of the mess on the kotatsu were several letters, all sent and signed by the same person, Adrenaline. He had been around for the past 3 months and nobody knew anything about him aside from he always wore a dark hoodie, bloodied bandages, a face mask covering his mouth, leaving only his toxic green glowing eyes on show. The new vigilante also had everyone completely stumped. He was aware of the fact that they have tried to trick them after they tried to capture him, but apparently after the incident that had happened. Afterwards, they're desperate to avoid angering and upsetting Adrenaline again. It was also known in the underground community that Adrenaline knew a lot about Trigger. If you wanted information about it, get in touch. And if someone entered the underground scene and had new information on it, Adrenaline gets his hands on them immediately. And Shota very much needed any information on Trigger that he could find, wanting to stop the deaths and the drag from being sold around, stopping the creation of instant villains, and the people affected by them, causing mayhem around Japan. Shota continued to stare at his laptop and the case files around it when the front door opened and closed. Shota Aya. We're home. 2 sets of footsteps walked into the room, Hitoshi and Hizashi back from shopping. He grunted in reply. Are you really still working on that case? You've been sitting here since 5 this morning, Dad. Shota shrugged his shoulders in face of his son's concerns. It just doesn't make sense. And it's not like I can even get a hold of my own informant. Shota grumbled, his old informant being unlucky in the fact they decided to take a dose of Trigger, unknowingly killing themselves in the process. Why don't you just contact that new one you were going on about, Adrenaline? You were saying they knew a lot about Trigger, right? Hizashi sat down next to him, shuffling under the kotatsu, and gave him a quick kiss on the cheek. I've been thinking about it. I'm just not too sure if I want to. My old informant was well known to other heroes, but Adrenaline isn't. We don't know his morals or how he works or anything, just that he wants Trigger gone. Shota sighed. He was on the fence about contacting the vigilante, but he can't say he wasn't curious on what he was like. But that's something you have in common, you both want to get rid of Trigger, so if anything, that might make him amicable to you if he isn't the greatest, I suppose. Hizashi smiled and squeezed his hand. Just send him an email or something, I've been missing actually seeing my husband, you know. The blonde man gave him one last smile and kiss before he stood up again, dragging Hitoshi into the kitchen with him so they could pack away the groceries. Shota sat there and weighed his options. He could either sit here stumped and confused, letting more people die, or he could at least try to contact the vigilante, see what he was like and what information he could give him. Information that could possibly save people's lives. In the end, it was an easily made decision. So now Shota sits there, having just sent the email off, and packs away the case files into a briefcase that sat next to him, rubbing his tired and strained eyes to try and alleviate some of the pressure behind them. Then his laptop pings with a new email notification. Surely he wouldn't have gotten back that quick. He must be busy with a day job or something. His eyes scan over the email Adrenaline sent back. He seemed nice enough over the email. Shota tapped his finger against the table a few times before writing back. To adrenaline@heromail.com. From eraserhead@heromail.com. Subject: R.E. A meeting. Adrenaline. Would tonight work for you, as I have time just before my patrol and I know a discreet cafe that we can meet at. Eraserhead. Satisfied with himself, he sent the message and relaxed so he could sleep for the first time in days. Izuku buzzed with excitement. He was going to meet a pro hero. Eraserhead, nonetheless. He read over the email again and shot off an affirmative, asking for the address of the cafe. He had 6 hours before they met tonight and he needed to make sure he was well presented. He wanted to make sure he was taken seriously, of course. No reason other than that. Okay, maybe he wanted to impress the hero and get his approval, but that doesn't mean anything. Izuku took a quick shower and changed the bandages on his arms and thighs, having found out that a good way to quickly hurt himself without people seeing was to just keep some sort of smaller blade in his pocket, shoving his hands in and using it to cut his thighs when needed. It was just efficient, though it had caused a lot of overlapping and sloppily done cuts. After he had rebandaged himself and changed into some comfortable pajamas so he could be comfortable until he had to leave, he started to arrange all of his notes. Ever since moving to the underground scene, he had created his own personal code to keep all of his notes on, whether it be quirk analysis, about his own quirk or others, the information he gathers on everything or even just his study notes. So far, notes-wise, he had transferred everything into new notebooks, burning the old ones, and even worked out a good system for them. He currently had 15 hero analysis books and they were in white notebooks, 3 ones on villain analysis and they were in a dark red, 8 books completely jam-packed with information on everything in the underground in dark green notebooks. People were very wary of Adrenaline for a reason. He was very good at making people spill things without meaning to, and in the underground, knowledge was power. He also had his study notebooks in a light blue color and he had the most number of them, but his most important 2 books by far were the black notebooks, filled with as much information about Trigger as he could find. They were his prized possession. He had completely dedicated the last 3 months of his life into learning everything in the underground and his training. He knew everyone and almost everyone knew of him and these 2 notebooks were the fruits of his labor. Izuku had decided to double-code it, wanting to keep it all secure and safe. The information was dangerous and he needed to make sure that the right person got a hold of it when he shared the information eventually. He wasn't delusioned to even think he could take down the Trigger operations without help. He had high hopes for Eraserhead though. From what he could find when he was younger and what he heard through the whispers of the underground, he was highly respected and had a very strong moral code when it came to saving people. And that is the sort of thing he was looking for. He also heard that Eraserhead had worked with a lot of vigilantes before too. Once he had arranged the notebooks he needed, both Trigger notebooks and his latest notebook on quirk analysis and his latest underground notebook too, Izuku stepped out of his room, double-checking his skin was covered, and went through to the kitchen, freezing when he saw his mother reading a letter, the feeling of rage and bloodlust coming off of her in violent waves. Her eyes snapped up at the sound of Izuku's footsteps and his breath wheezed out of him at the anger in her eyes. What the hell is this? She flicked the letter up, breathing harshly through her teeth. Izuku peered at the letter. It was from his online school, talking about how well he was improving and that they were recommending him to some of the college credit courses, if he was so inclined to take them. But it's just from school. I've been getting, a bit ahead is all. Izuku shrinked in on himself, waiting for the inevitable blow, and then for the next thing he knew, everything faded away and turned to black. He came back to himself when he was lying on the floor, pain numbed away and his quirk thrumming familiarly through his system. He pushed himself up slowly as he breathed in through his nose and out of his mouth. What the hell just happened? I don't remember anything. Izuku rubbed his face, pulling his hands back when he touched something wet and looked down at his blood-soaked hands. He stood up, hunger forgotten, and sped back into his room and over to his mirror, grimacing at the sight that greets him. His nose is gushing blood, a blackening bruise going over the surface of it, and his face is dotted with cuts everywhere over it, all of them bleeding sluggishly. He also ended up with a nasty black eye, completing his new look, apparently. Great. I have to go meet Eraserhead looking like this. Izuku took his time cleaning away the blood, making sure to shove 2 tissues up his nose to try and clog up the blood, but he kept having to change them from how quickly they soaked through with blood. His nose kept on bleeding steadily for the next 20 minutes, finally slowing down to a stop, and he breathed a sigh of relief. His eyes were glowing harshly in the now darkness of his room, which was strange because he swore when he left, it was light out. He clicked on his computer and looked at the time, reeling back in shock at the late hour. He left his room to go and get food at 3:30, and now it was somehow 8 at night. What happened? I couldn't have possibly been out that long, right? I don't even know how I ended up injured. Izuku went on to his email, seeing one sitting there from Eraserhead, and opened it up. From Eraserhead@heromail.com. To new adrenaline@heromail.com. Subject, address and time. Adrenaline. The address is 184 XXXX Street. I start my patrol at 10 p.m. I will be at this address at 8:30. Until then, stop by if you're free. Hope to see you there. Eraserhead. Izuku jumped out of his seat when he saw it was meant to be at 8:30. He throws off his blood-covered clothes and looks down at his torso, which he somehow didn't notice had a large cut going diagonal from his right collarbone and down to his navel. The cut was deep and gaping open, blood covered every inch of his skin. Izuku blinked at the wound and sighed in irritation before speedily bandaging himself up. He threw on his usual gear he wears when he goes out as Adrenaline, a dark hoodie and face mask, bandages going down and covering his arms and hands, and a pair of baggy running shorts with thick leggings underneath. Of course, his red shoes and metal bat from his The First Trigger deal strapped to his back, finishing off his outfit. Izuku picked up his bag and left his room, being careful as to not leave blood-stained fingerprints on anything. As he left the apartment, he noticed the pool of blood in the kitchen and pressed his lips together. He slammed the door behind him when he left, the wood of the door cracking. It turned out Izuku really didn't need to rush out of the house as he ended up a little early. He looked up at the cafe and laughed at the name, brightening his mood. A cat cafe, huh, Eraserhead? Never pegged you as the type. Izuku gave one last rub to his probably red-rimmed eyes, having spent most of the walk trying and failing to not cry at how miserable he felt, the anxiety and adrenaline sweeping through his body not helping at all. In all honesty, Izuku was pretty sure he looked like a train wreck, the black eye and broken and bruised nose, the bandages on his arms, all the cuts on his face, and now the red, teary eyes. He was sure that Eraserhead was going to judge him so hard for this. The door chimed as he walked in, hands stuffed into his pockets and head ducked down, eyes searching the room for someone who at least looked like the hero. His eyes caught onto someone with long dark hair, a white scarf wrapped around his neck and a baggy jumpsuit surrounded by at least 3 different cats, and then Izuku noticed the golden goggles on the table and he made his way over, anxiety and nerves twisting his gut. Izuku cleared his throat once he was standing next to the table, one in the far back that had a full view of the cafe, and the man looked up at him, his dark eyes assessing. Adrenaline, I assume? He had a deeper voice and squinted at Izuku. Just Eraserhead? The man nodded and plucked out his hero license, handing it over for Izuku to investigate, definitely earning more points for Izuku's appreciation and respect. Once confirming that it's a legitimate license, Izuku took the seat across from Eraserhead and 2 more cats made their way over to the table and cuddled up to Izuku. So this is about Trigger, correct? Izuku asked and pulled his bag into his side protectively, weary in case this was just a scheme to try and take him in again. He had a lot of hope with Eraserhead and he didn't want it to be falsely placed on the man. It is just, I'm aware that you've got a lot of information on it, probably the most out of any informant in Japan, and since I've now been placed on the case, I was wanting to see what I could find. And for that, my best option was to seek you out. The man explained and Izuku nodded at that and brought out his notebooks on Trigger and the Underground. Name your price. Izuku thought about that for a couple seconds. I do have quite a bit of information on Trigger. Some of it is very sensitive, things that need to be left for now before anything happens to it. My price for giving you all my information on this is that you, or anyone else for that matter, police or hero, don't try to take me in and arrest me, leave me be. For that, I will work with you for as long as you need. Izuku tilted his head. As I said, I have a lot of information and some of it needs very special and specific planning and execution. I think you would be good for that. I have no problem with your conditions. I have worked with a lot of different vigilantes and informants previously. I'll also make sure that nobody tries to move in on arresting you, but only for vigilantism or anything to do with your information gathering. Anything to do with needless violence and such will break that. They both stop speaking as a waitress comes over to take their orders. 1 black coffee with a coffee cake and 1 hot chocolate with a strawberry and kiwi pastry. Yeah, that's definitely fair. For what it's worth, I have zero plans to do that. I just fight the baddies and give them to you guys to deal with. And some mild manipulation. Izuku smiled crookedly, though Eraserhead couldn't see, and they both thanked the waitress when she set down both their orders. Izuku turned his head away so he could take a drink. Once he placed his drink back on the table, he opened up the notebooks. My notebooks on Trigger are doubly coded for security reasons. I don't share anything that isn't coded and I don't share information through technology. It's always just in person and in a secure environment. That's how I work. Eraserhead hummed and nodded, peering at the code. What codes are these in? He asked, curiously staring at the symbols on the page. I first translated it into cattle code, and then I translated that into my own code, obviously adjusting it slightly to fit KC. Izuku shrugged and Eraserhead stopped, his coffee halfway to his mouth, and he slowly looked at him. Cattle code? He asked, his voice thick and heavy with an unreadable emotion. Izuku brightened up. Yeah. It's Nedzu's own personal code. It took me like a good week and a half to learn. It was pretty difficult but a lot of fun to try to crack it and then learn it. He's such an amazing hero and his quirk, high specs, is such an interesting one, allowing his brain to work so much faster than any humans alive. The sheer level of his comprehensive skills and his skill to take the smallest piece of information about a situation and easily formulate a strategy to combat it is just amazing. Izuku se in a huge breath, forgetting to breathe in his excitement on getting to talk about a hero he admired. And he was also the principal of UA, too. If Izuku could feel pain right now, he was pretty sure his face would hurt from how hard he was smiling. A week and a half? What the hell? It was whispered under Eraserhead's breath, but Izuku still heard it. He tilted his head in confusion and Eraserhead continued, It only took you a week and a half to break one of Nedzu's personally made codes, and not only that, it is also one of, if not the most, difficult codes he has manufactured. That's what you just said? Eraserhead raised his eyebrows at him, mouth pulled into a confused frown. I guess so, yeah. But it really wasn't that hard. Anyone could easily do it, and I'm sure Nedzu has much harder ones to break and learn. Izuku waved his arms around to emphasize his point, shaking his head. Eraserhead sighed and Izuku sat up straight from his slouch. All right then, let's go over what you know about Trigger so far. When Shota pictured what Adrenaline acted and looked like, a beaten-up, meek and upset kid was definitely not what he thought of. But that's who the terrifyingly smart and efficient vigilante was apparently. When a kid walked through the cafe at 8:30 with slumped shoulders, a black eye, broken nose and both eyes red and teary from crying, he had just casted it aside in his mind, maybe double-checking around to make sure the kid wasn't being followed. Then, Shota watched as the kid made his way over to him, and Shota noticed his eerily bright green glowing eyes and connected the dots. The kid stopped at his table in the back, fiddling with his hands. They had blood stuck in the creases, as if he had tried to wash it away, and the bandages had bloody spots too. Was he okay? Was he safe? And cleared his throat. Shota also noted how the kid, from what he could see, had veins that glowed a light golden-green color underneath the skin on his neck. Adrenaline, I assume? Shota gave one of the cats on his lap a scratch to try and soothe the slight worry for the kid. He looked even younger than Hitoshi was. Just Eraserhead? Shota nodded, and with the worried and apprehensive look on the kid's face, he took out his hero license and handed it over to him. Adrenaline took his time looking over it and handed it back after a few moments and sat down across from Shota. So, this is about Trigger, correct? Adrenaline held onto his bag tightly. The nerves came off of the kid in waves. It was strange to think that this was the person that so many people in the underground were afraid of. Was he always like this? It is just, I'm aware that you've got a lot of information on it, probably the most out of any informant in Japan, and since I've now been placed on the case, I was wanting to see what I could find. And for that, my best option was to seek you out. Adrenaline nodded and relaxed a tiny bit, Shota noticed. Adrenaline looked at him for a moment, assessing, and then pulled out 3 notebooks and placed them carefully on the table between them. Name your price. Adrenaline explained what his price was and why, feeling slightly touched that the vigilante wanted to give him this information for such a minor price. From what Shota had heard, he thought it would be a lot more expensive, and thought that Shota was good for this job. So, he agreed to the conditions but set out a few of his own. You always did have to be very clear when making any sort of deal. Yeah, that's definitely fair. For what it's worth, I have 0 plans to do that. I just fight the baddies and give them to you guys to deal with. And some minor manipulation. Even though Adrenaline wore a mask, Shota could still see the smile in his eyes as he spoke, continuing to light up when their drinks and cakes arrived. Shota politely looked away whilst the kid took a drink. Once Adrenaline was done, he opened the notebook and turned it towards Shota, the symbols and characters on the page not making any sense. My notebooks on Trigger are doubly coded for security reasons. I don't share anything that isn't coded, and I don't share information through technology. It's always just in person and in a secure environment. That's how I work. Just how smart is this kid? This code looks complex as hell. What codes are these in? Shota wasn't sure what. He expected the answer to be, but it definitely wasn't what he was told. At all. I first translated it into cattle code. Excuse me, what? And then I translated that into my own code, obviously adjusting it slightly to fit KC. Shota stared at the code, his mind trying to reboot and understand what he was just told. He looked up at the vigilante. Cattle code? He asked, confused and maybe a tiny bit scared of what was next to come out of the kid's mouth. He listened as Adrenaline spoke, getting more and more excited after each word left his mouth, almost bouncing up and down on the seat, disturbing the cats that were napping on him. His eyes were scrunched up with a bright smile he was sure was under the mask. Wait, did he say it took him just a week and a half? People have been trying to break that code for years. A week and a half? What the hell? Shota said distantly. At the boy's confusion, he continued, it only took you a week and a half to break one of Nedzu's personally made codes, and not only that, it is also one of, if not the most, difficult codes he has manufactured. That's what you just said? The boy's eyebrows scrunched together. I guess so, yeah. But it really wasn't that hard. Anyone could easily do it, and I'm sure Nedzu has much harder ones to break and learn. The boy waved his arms about placatingly. No, Nedzu does not have any harder codes to break. Cattle code was the hardest one that the rat himself had written. What have I gotten myself into? Shota sighed and shifted himself upright, Adrenaline doing the same. All right then, let's go over what you know about Trigger so far. Shota hummed, thinking. I'm aware of how it is meant to work, boosting the quirk of whoever takes it but also weakening their sense of reason and such. I'm also aware that it was first made to enhance the power of weaker quirks but ended up banned in many countries, here included. Shota paused and thought over the other information he knew. In Asia, a lot of the trigger we have is weaker and also lasts a couple minutes, showing that someone had used it if they have a blackened tongue, but there seems to be this new variant, I suppose, of it going around. It's lasting much longer than it usually does, and by the end, It either kills the person using it or they lose their memory from anywhere to a couple of hours to, at the most so far, a decade. Adrenaline hummed and nodded. Aside from that, we don't know much. We've tried to interrogate people who taken the new trigger and have survived, but they either don't know what's happened or they end up refusing to speak. That isn't too much, but I'm really not surprised. A lot of the information I have gotten on it was tough to get my hands on. Really not a fun time. Adrenaline paused and his glowing eyes glazed over, as if stuck in thought. He shook his head to JRK himself out of it and continued, with normal trigger deals, it was always just gotten from people making it themselves and selling it on, but with this variant, it's being called trigger puller. From what I've heard, it's different. About a month and a half ago, I got some information about some rumors, which I went and confirmed myself about these factories. Adrenaline looked around the cafe and leaned forwards towards Shota, speaking quietly. They're relatively new, they started around 2 months ago, and they're currently being used to produce copious quantities of this drag, but it's how they're doing it that's the worst part. They've been taking people off the streets and kidnapping them, unwanted people mostly, like the homeless, but their preferred person is homeless and runaway kids. They would give them promises of safety and hot meals. And they're taking them and experimenting on them. They have a graveyard for the bodies. Vivid emerald eyes shone with unshed tears. They're taking people and killing them for this drag, and then they're selling it and killing even more people. And I can't do anything about it right now because I need the heroes on my side. It's a very delicate situation. Shota's heart dropped, dread stabbing at his gut. This really wasn't what he expected. He hissed a breath through his clenched teeth. I only know where one of the factories is right now. Other things about trigger puller are that it often has some type of poisonous drag in it, though sometimes it's not. I've heard it's been cut with things from cane, to arsenic, to matcha powder, which was a pretty strange conversation that I had. Oh, we're about to fight? 1 second, let me inject matcha-flavored trigger into my veins. That guy was an idiot. Adrenaline huffed out a laugh. I'm still looking to find what's causing the memory loss, but I know that it is purposeful. They make sure that specific people get either the memory loss or the death sentence one. I'm looking for a pattern, but I just can't seem to find one, and it's driving me crazy. That's not a lot. How did you confirm that the factories were being used for trigger puller and the experimentation? Shota questioned. He didn't really have a great feeling about that. Adrenaline blinked at him a couple of times. Anyways, Eraserhead-san, it was very lovely to meet you. Please email me about another meeting time and I can tell you some more information. I really do have to be going. Haha. The boy threw some yen on the table and hurriedly, yet also gently, put his notebooks back into his bag and bolted out of the cafe. Shota slumped forwards in his seat and placed his head in his hands, rubbing at his face. God, what the F-dash? Later that night, Shota slipped into his and Hizashi's bed, warmed from his husband's body heat, and placed a kiss to the back of Hizashi's neck. Hizashi groaned, turning over to face him, and gave Shota a short, sleepy kiss. How was your patrol and meeting? His words slurred with exhaustion and eyes focused on Shota's lips for his reply. Don't even get me started. Adrenaline is younger than Hitoshi, I'm almost completely sure of it. And he was injured when he came in. Hizashi, once he had processed the words, raised his eyebrows in disbelief. You're kidding. Was he okay? Shota shrugged and pushed his husband's hair away from his eyes and planted a kiss on his forehead. Hizashi hummed contentedly. Think so? Well, he at least seemed in okay spirits. He seemed like a good kid too. Now get back to sleep. I'll tell you more in the morning. Shota pulled up the covers around them and buried his face into Hizashi's hair, drifting off to sleep. It had been a few months, since Izuku's first meeting with Eraser, and they were slowly building a case together. They tried to meet around once a week together, almost always at the same cat cafe as the first time, and he was so glad he decided to trust Eraser with this case. The Erasure hero always took him seriously and was really good to bounce ideas off of. He had good morals and was amazing at fighting too. He was respectful and would always listen to his mumbling about quirks. He would even ask questions and discuss them with him. Eraserhead, Izuku had decided, was a good and strong ally to have. It was currently later at night, around 10 p.m., and Izuku was walking back to his apartment, whistling a tune and his hands stuffed into his pockets, dressed up in his usual adrenaline outfit when he suddenly heard shouting. F-dash! Let me go! Help! The voice was deeper than Izuku's, but the voice definitely sounded younger, still. Izuku, alarmed with the shout, started sprinting towards the yell, grabbing the razor in his pocket and digging it harshly into his thigh, eyes flickering around as his quirk activated. He assessed the situation. There was a taller, purple-haired boy struggling against two men in masks that were very similar to the Scream mask. Dread and anxiety filled his gut as he ran towards them. Those were the masks that people in trigger-puller factories wore. This couldn't be good. Izuku, with his enhanced strength and speed, took them out with a few well-placed chops on their neck's pressure points. Thank you, Eraser, for teaching me that. The two men crumpled on the floor. Izuku swiftly tied them up with zip ties and turned to the scared boy. Hey, are you all right? The purple-haired boy looked up at him. Yeah. Just didn't expect to be a part of an attempted kidnapping tonight. Who are you? Izuku, whilst the boy spoke, looked for something to carry the two men in, grinning when he found a few garbage bins, and started putting the men in them. I'm Adrenaline. A vigilante. Nice to meet you. Who are you? The boy's eyes widened as Izuku stood up and tested the strength of his pull against the bags and the men in them. Shinso Hitoshi. Adrenaline, yeah, I know you. Heard about you a lot. Shinso looked down at the bodies in the bags. What are you doing? Izuku laughed, taking the trash out. Now come on, we're going to the police so we can get your parents or guardians or whatever to come pick you up so you're safe. With that, Izuku left the alleyway, Shinso trailing after him. Izuku watched as Shinso gave a wide berth around the two bin bags and fell into step beside him. They walked in a comfortable silence, Shinso peering at Izuku every couple of moments, as if he wanted to say something. Eventually he did. Thanks for saving me back there. Izuku smiled brightly and bounced as he walked. It was really no problem. Don't sweat it. After a few minutes of walking later, they reached the police station and shuffled inside, the heavy bags thunking against the steps up to the door, Izuku snickering at the noise. Izuku flung open the door. Evening, everyone. I'm back again with your usual dose of villains that I have captured. Sansa looked over at him and once he spotted the bags, grew alarmed. Please don't tell me you've murdered anyone, Adrenaline. I can't handle this today. Izuku laughed again at Sansa and shook his head. Nah, kitty cat, just knocked out and I needed a way to transport them back here. Izuku dropped the bags by Sansa's desk and turned, walking towards the door. See you later, Shinso. Call your parents or whatever and try not to get involved in any more attempted kidnappings. Izuku closed the door behind him after waving goodbye and his shoulders slumped, exhaustion and anxiety tugging at his stomach as he dragged his feet back to his house. He never realized just how exhausting being around people could be. It's either that or the perpetual dread that always racked his body. Or the soul-consuming numbness that only hurting himself seemed to help to somewhat drive away. He pulled at his bottom half of his outfit that was sticky with blood and sighed wearily and rubbed his eyes. Izuku arrived at his apartment and went around the back to access the fire escape and jumped up, wishing that he didn't ever have to come back to this hell hole that it had become. Izuku stared blankly at his wall, eyes shifting in and out of focus as laid completely unmoving on his bed. His entire body felt heavy and tired, despite having slept almost all day, and he just lacked motivation to do anything. It always got like this, whenever he hadn't been hurt in a while. And the simple answer would be to just hurt himself more, but dredging up the motivation to even hurt himself was just too much at times. And right then was one of those times. It was as if his body was weighed down, pressure from all sides encompassing him as if he was deep underwater. Izuku's ears were aching from always using his hearing aids, never taking them out, and he just wishes that it would count to activate his quirk. Maybe that way he wouldn't have to feel like this anymore. Longing for someone to just be there for him scored down his heart like tally marks on a prison wall, remembering the time where he didn't know what feeling like this was like. When he had friends and a support system, before his quirk came in. He remembered the feeling when it first activated on his father whilst holding his hand. It wasn't too bad of a situation, but as soon as they found out what it really could do, all he could remember is the bright orange flames and the burning heat, leaving his chest covered in bumpy burn scars. And then he accidentally activated when helping Kaken up from a fall at school and heat just burst from him. All he could hear was screaming and yelling. And then, everyone left him, hated him and pushed him away. Izuku's arms burned with the want to hurt, his mind fuzzy, as if it was veiled in dark gray and his vision blurring. Slowly, he pulled himself upwards, blinking the fuzziness out from his vision and rubbed at his eyes. Izuku scratched at his wrists, making his scabbed-over cuts bleed, and his eyes started to sharpen and glow. Suddenly, he blinked again and he was in the kitchen, a half-prepared meal bubbling away at the stove, Izuku absent-mindedly stirring away at it as he came into awareness. He picked up the spoon and tried some, grimacing at the sour, disgusting taste. He blinked again, suddenly sitting at the table, 2 empty bowls and a half-full glass of water on the table. Izuku sighed, finishing off the glass of water, and took the 2 bowls to the sink and cleaned them, stashing them back in the cupboard where he assumed he got them from. It was happening every time his quirk was either not active or just active to the slightest point. He'd lose time. When his quirk was fully active, he felt alive, he knew what was happening and his world felt complete and right, but as soon as it wore off and he didn't hurt himself quick enough, he'd keep losing more and more time, unable to make sense of what was happening around him as he felt as if he was slowly going insane. Izuku bit his lip as he stumbled back towards his room, his head lolling with every step and his vision swimming. He pushed himself off of the wall he was leaning on and over to his desk where his knife sat, picking it up and slashing marks down his wrist. He took a deep breath as his world suddenly came back into view, everything clearing up and making sense. He felt like he could finally breathe again. Izuku grabbed a blanket and sat at his desk, turning on his laptop, and picked up one of the packets of little chocolates Eraser had started to give to him around 3 months ago. UA's entrance exam is in 2 days. I've completed almost all of my school exams. I'm technically ahead with all the college courses even. What else is there to do? He chewed his lip between his teeth, biting off the top layer of skin. There isn't much I can do in 2 days. I can maybe plan what I'm going to do to activate my quirk. That's too easy. They'll have bathrooms I can go to so I can make sure I'm in peak health. Izuku breathed, his eyes fluttering wildly around his bare room, hands shaking and tapping against his desk as he looked up forms for adjusting your quirk's files and descriptions. He clicked his tongue and sighed, thinking up a plan. Izuku took his first step into UA, eyes glowing a bright green and veins glowing yellow under his uniform. He knew Eraserhead worked here, so you can never be too careful. His stomach was clenching and unclenching with nerves that made him feel as if he was going to throw up. Thank God he was used to it at least. 2 days ago he'd updated his quirk registration, making sure that it seemed as if it were just a simple strength enhancement instead of what it truly does. He knew that if heroes knew the truth of what it was they would stop him, and he can't let them. He needed this. He can't let anyone stop him or he'll never be able to live with himself. Izuku was wearing just a simple tracksuit as he didn't exactly have a uniform for the exam, the hood pulled over his curls as he made his way down the path, eyes wide and unbelieving as he took in the sight of Yue, unable to believe he was truly there finally. Somebody shoved past him as his eyes were downcast, Tiskenji at Izuku. He looked up, catching the back of Kaken as he stormed his way past him as he was distracted by the sight of his dream school shining in the fresh morning glow, sun shining brightly down. Izuku gripped his new black and gold backpack, Eraserhead inspired, though he would never tell the man himself that his old yellow All Might one had been totally destroyed in an incident that involved fire ants and a really strange person who really hated Endeavor. Izuku thinks he might have been a little too drunk, but he wasn't really upset about it. Not like he had anything important in there that day. Distracted in his thoughts, Izuku missed the slight crack in the pavement, tripped forwards. Guess I'll just die here. Not going to be a hero anymore. Izuku felt a slap on his back, suddenly floating forwards into a circle, limbs scrambling to trying and get a purchase on something that wasn't there. Oh my Kami, I'm sorry for using my quirk on you. I would have asked, but it would have been a bad omen if you tripped. I hope you don't mind or anything. Izuku looked over at the voice, finding a girl with a short bob and a sweet smile looking at him, peachy cheeks squishing together with her apologetic smile. Izuku waved his hands, the force of it sending him reeling into a roll again. No. It's okay, thank you. Izuku smiled back at her as she pressed her fingers together, mind racing around with thoughts about her quirk and what it was. Izuku braced his legs as he landed, his gravity restored back to normal. Anyway, I gotta go. Good luck on your exam. The sweet, bubbly girl skipped away after she gave Izuku a last smile, and he stood shocked. Someone was actually nice to me. Izuku screamed internally. So amazing. Izuku smiled to himself, heart clenching, his previous sickening nerves replaced by excited butterflies as he started to make his way down the path again. The written exam had taken 3 hours in total and Izuku was feeling positive about it. It was a lot of fun. A lot of the questions were easy to breeze through and there were even some about quirk analysis at the end. Before Izuku could start mentally preparing himself for whatever is about to happen in the practical exam, Present Mike appeared at the front of the hall. Izuku's eyes widened at the sight of one of his favorite heroes, simultaneously tugging at the hoodie he wore, the Present Mike one of course. Are you ready? Izuku bit his tongue as nobody replied, the silence deafening. Tough crowd, yo? Let me hear a yeah. The crowd was silent again, Izuku biting his tongue so he wouldn't embarrass himself by yelling his support of one of his favorite heroes. Izuku looked down at his paper and fiddled with it, looking down at the blacked-out robots. Izuku sat and listened to Present Mike's explanation, but as the boy that was asking the question about the zero-pointer whipped around and pointed to him, calling Izuku out, he shrunk back in his seat, excitement turning back into anxiety as some people started to laugh at him. Present Mike called the attention back towards himself and Izuku started pulling at his hoodie, wanting to pull the hood over his head and hide from people's gaze. Everyone started to leave to get prepared to get to their battle arena and Izuku waited until everyone had left before starting to pack his things. His lungs felt tight and his vision was blurring with embarrassed and anxious tears when he felt a hand placing itself in his curls. Hey little listener. Izuku whirled around and behind him stood the voice hero himself. Izuku's eyes bulged as he froze. You looked a bit anxious and upset about that whole thing, but don't be yo. I bet you'll do great, huh? With those final words and a bright, almost blinding, smile, Present Mike gave his curls a ruffle and walked away. Oh, also, nice hoodie. The hero winked from across the room and waved as he left. Izuku numbly waved back, cheeks warming with a blush, at the empty room and then his brain kicked back into gear and he rushed out towards the locker rooms to get properly changed and to make sure he was prepared enough to take on those robots. He took his bag into one of the changing stalls and got changed into his workout gear and popped in some colored eye contacts. He knew Eraser worked here, so better to be safe than sorry. He rolled up the long sleeves of his top, the tracksuit zip-up hanging on the door, and he flipped open his knife, digging 4 deep cuts into each wrist and putting it back into his bag and then placing a smaller blade into his pocket in case. He bandaged up his arm and threw the zip-up top over his long sleeve, stepped out of the stall and then made his way to the door, head down even though the room was now empty. His heart pounded against his ribs as he made his way down the hallway when somebody curled up in a ball, back against the wall caught his eye. Izuku looked closer, the boy seeming familiar as he cautiously made his way towards him, eyes catching gravity-defying purple hair. Hey, are you okay? Izuku bent at the knees and sat on the ground in front of the boy, his head shooting up after Izuku spoke. His eyes were wide and wild, lips bitten red and raw. Fine. The boy grunted at him, eyes narrowed and lips pulled back in an almost snarl. Are you sure? I'm assuming you're here for the entrance exam. I'm sure you'll do awesome, Purple-kun. Izuku smiled at the boy, who now seemed confused but looked to be at least less upset. Izuku stood up and waved to the boy as he left. Good luck. And begin. Izuku raced forwards and into the fake city, eyes locked onto the first robot he could see and tore through it with a punch, metal plates hanging off of it as it powered down and died. Izuku watched his knuckles turn red more and more from every robot he came across, but that pain at least fueled his quirk more, even by the slightest amount. He had eventually picked up a metal sheet though, when he could tell that his knuckles had given out and broken themselves, and smashed through the robots with that. Izuku was actually enjoying being able to use his quirk so much and so freely, basking in the chaos of everyone fighting around him too. Then, there's a cloud crash. Vibrating through the fake city, people starting to run away from the noise, and Izuku is about to as well, but then he heard a yell and looked back, seeing the sweet, bubbly girl from earlier, and before he knew it, his legs were sprinting towards her, taking in the massive piece of rubble, crushing her, and shoved a hand in his pocket, digging the blade as deep as he could into his thigh. Blood started to gush out at a rapid rate, and a vague sense of panic went through Izuku as he realized he might have hit something dangerous, but that was all nulled out as soon as he reached the girl. Izuku's skin glowed bright gold, brighter than it Eve had before, as his eyes shone bright blue. Thank God he had the foresight for colored contacts, and with a quick flick of his hand, the piece of rubble flew off the girl and he swiftly picked her up in a princess carry, very aware of how close the robot was. He sprinted away to the middle of the street and the alarm for the end of the exam rang through the city. "Are you okay?" Izuku asked, sitting himself and the girl on the ground. "Yeah, thank you so much for saving me." She smiled at him again, eyes crinkled at the corners. Izuku shifted to the side, wiping the blood seeping through his clothes onto his hand to try and make it look like that was injured instead, and also to hide it from the girl, Uraraka. Quickly enough, Recovery Girl came around and healed them both, squinting and glancing suspiciously at Izuku. "Now dear, you might get rather exhausted." Izuku jumped up whilst she was mid-sentence with a smile. "Thank you so much. I've gotta go now." Izuku disappeared off in the distance, thankful that it was over now and he could hide himself away and overthink about it all. That night as he's half asleep, slowly drifting off, he felt his stomach start spasming violently, teeth chattering and body feeling as if it was shaking with the force. He heard a noise as if his door was opening. And then he felt arms wrap around him softly, gently embracing him as he couldn't move at all. "What's happening? Why can't I move? I'm sorry for how I've treated you, Izuku. I love you and I regret it so much. You're my son and I love you." Izuku's stomach kept twitching and he kept shaking as he tried to pry his eyes or lips open, or just move at all. He saw the shadow of her body still hugging him, and then he pried his eyes open, being met with his door closed and his mother no longer hugging him. The phantom feeling of arms around him that never were, that haven't hugged him in years. The whispered, "I love you," dying on his tongue as his ears popped. He closed his eyes and lets himself drift off to sleep again, still shaking and tears falling down his cheeks. Izuku blinked blearily into his pillow and yawned, stuffing his face further into the nest he had made of his blankets and pillows. He dragged another blanket up and covered more of his body, the soft and fluffy material soothing his tired body. His night had continued much the same, staying half asleep, cold sweat dripping off his body and ears popping whilst he hallucinated, shadows running around his room, soft and gentle touches that were never there as his muscles spasmed and Izuku cried. He was so glad it was over and he could move again. All through the night, his body was full of adrenaline and it was like his quirk wasn't responding to what he needed it to do. It had never felt like that before. Yes, his quirk naturally made him terribly anxious, but usually his fight or flight kicked in. Maybe he should do some more research on adrenaline responses and fight or flight. That could be a good idea. Izuku sat up in bed and rubbed harshly at his stinging eyes, movements slow with the last dredges of the sleep that he didn't get. He stretched himself backwards, listening to the pops and cracks of his bones, and reached to his side table and slid in his hearing aids. He usually never took them out. He could never tell whenever his mom would yell for him otherwise. Not that she did often, but the few times she had yelled at him to come see her and he didn't have his hearing aids in, it ended horribly. It happened twice, and if Izuku had any say, it'll hopefully never happen again. Izuku shifted out of bed and slid into the hallway, quickly getting himself into the bathroom and looked in the mirror. His face was pale but also flushed, skin shining and face damp with sweat. He grabbed a washcloth and started wiping his face, his body too unstable to keep standing through a shower right now. He'll deal with it later. After cleaning himself up, Izuku sat himself back in his bedroom, sliding into his chair and opening up his laptop. He ended up making it untraceable, making it easier to store backups of his notebooks and to get in contact with information buyers and his clients and such easier. Izuku ended up staying there for a while, looking into side effects from being high on adrenaline so much, and found himself on a page about fight, flight, freeze and fawn. I think the only one that's truly good for me is a fight response, if I can figure out a way to trigger a specific response. Maybe flight would help in drawing villains away from civilians. Freeze and fawn don't have much use for me, but it would be a good idea to, if I were to fall into a freeze response accidentally, figure out how to get out of it and move past it. Fawn, I could just learn some better manipulation tactics, to be honest. Before Izuku knew it, he blinked and it was suddenly dark out. His desk lamp turned on and his Quirk notebook was filled up with 3 new pages of ideas to test. Not this again. I can't keep losing time like this. I really can't. Izuku sighed and got up, getting himself ready for a night of cleaning the beach and walking the streets. The next week continued much the same, as if his life was a movie that was just blurring together. A montage of heavy limbs, tired eyes, anxiety and numbness. His sleep problems kept persisting, having an episode at least once a night, and then the rest of the day was a haze of deadened emotions that felt like they were echoing in his chest. A week since the entrance exam. The results should be coming soon. I really hope I got in. I need this. By noon, Izuku found himself in the kitchen and he looked at the counter, seeing the mail pile. He shuffled through the letters and found an envelope with his name on it, a UA wax seal on the back. He froze, looking at the seal, and ran a finger over it. Izuku took a deep breath in and grabbed the glass of water he came out of his room to get and walked as quickly as he could back into his room. He stared down the envelope as he sat on his desk, heart beating harshly against his ribs. And then, with a determined nod, he grabbed the letter and ripped it open, a disc falling out and clattering onto the wooden surface. It sat there for a moment and then light burst upwards from it. I am here as a projection. All Might. The truth is, I didn't just come to this city to fight villains. You are looking at the newest UA faculty member. Izuku paused, unsure how to truly feel about it. He doesn't hold what All Might said against him, and he is a great hero. But he just isn't the same to Izuku anymore. The projection of All Might carried on. You passed the written exam with flying colors, young man. And at the practical, you got a score of 49 combat points, which is above the 45-point threshold. Izuku's chest started squeezing, hope starting to thrum through his body. But wait, there's more. Behold this screen. On the screen that is inside the screen, not the screen that All Might is on, appeared Uraraka, the sweet girl he saved. This was too confusing. Excuse me? Sorry to bother you, but you know the boy with the greenish-black hair? His skin was like, glowing really bright, and he had glowing blue eyes too? You know who I'm talking about? Izuku tilted his head. That's me. Uraraka continued on. Would it be possible to share some of my points with him? Izuku froze, heart stopping and stomach fluttering with anxiety. The girl gave a smile and rubbed her cheek with a couple of fingers. I mean, he saved me. I don't know how many points he got, but he could have just left me there like everyone else did and got himself more points. But he came back for me. I just want to do something to say thank you. Heroes are meant to save people, and he saved me. Izuku teared up, his breath labored as he tried to keep them at bay. Nobody had ever done something like that for him. Nobody had ever been so kind to him. The girl looked up, eyes bright and shining. He was my hero. Izuku gasped a wet breath, losing the battle against his leaky eyes. All Might started to speak again, catching Izuku's attention as he pawed at his eyes, rubbing away the tears. More than anything, it is your actions that have touched people. All Might smiled through the screen and Izuku tearily smiled back. So, because of your bravery, take your 45 rescue points. Combine that with your 49 combat points. That brings you up to 94 points and places you in first place in the UA entrance exam. Izuku choked on a strangled breath. Come, young Midoriya. This is your hero academia. Izuku, with his now high spirits, decided that to celebrate his acceptance, he would go out as adrenaline. It was something he'd been neglecting to do lately, his low moods keeping him isolated and inside all the time, so it would be nice to get outside and do something. There wasn't too much going on that night. The streets were quiet aside from a few drunken arguments that weren't too difficult to separate. And then, there's a loud booming noise through the streets, people screaming and yelling in panic and pain. Help! Help us! Izuku's ears twitched and he ran into an alleyway, making sure he cut himself deep enough that he'd be able to stand his ground even against someone with a strength enhancement quirk. Patching himself up so he doesn't bleed everywhere, he ran out of the alley and towards the screaming. When Izuku finally arrived at where the chaos was coming from, he noticed a few things at once. The first thing he noticed was there were 3 people attacking from what he could tell. A water quirk, a strength quirk, and another quirk that he couldn't really tell much about, but from the look of it, it seemed to be able to turn water into some sort of weak acid from the way it was slowly dissolving the street. The next thing Izuku noticed was that the man with the water quirk had flooded what Izuku knew to be a very popular nightclub. And it was a Friday night, and if the club was filled with water, then Acid Woman would be able to manipulate that. Izuku immediately ran and dived into the water, assisting people out as it filled up faster and faster, and by the time that around 20 people were still left inside, there was only just a sliver of air left to breathe. Izuku's lungs burned with the need to breathe, and his skin started to burn up as Acid Woman started to turn the water into acid. Izuku reached out and grabbed a man and a woman, tightly holding hands even though they had fallen unconscious, and put their arms around his neck, grabbing another woman as he swam by, kicking his legs as fast as he could go to try and deposit them out safely. Izuku got the 3 of them out and dived back into the water, his skin a ruby red and his eyes burned. Izuku kept going, diving under and grabbing as many people as he could and dragging them out. He could feel even his clothes and bandages dissolving, his chest heaving as he was unable to get much breath for long. There was just one more person for him to get. Just one more. The water, acid, was thicker now, as if he was wading through mud, his eyes darkening around the edges as he reached out. He grabbed the man by his arm and pulled him along sluggishly, head spinning. It was as if he was almost about to pass out and also as if his body was dialed up, everything wild and vivid. Izuku finally got to the exit, pulling the man with him as he gulped in air greedily. And then he noticed the man wasn't. He wasn't awake nor was he breathing. Izuku frantically scrambled to check the man's pulse. The chaos of yelling, heroes, and emergency services finally arriving at the scene causing more noise, all faded away as he waited, chest still heaving, for a flutter of a heartbeat against his finger. But it never came. The man didn't shoot up and cough away the water in his chest, he didn't start breathing. Both Izuku and the dead man, the man he failed to save, were covered in acid burns, clothing burned away and blood lazily slipping down their wet skin, mixing with the thick, sludgy, acidic water. Izuku strangles a gasp, falling forwards and over the man, almost protectively, not that it truly mattered now, as he choked on a sob. Well, what do we have here, huh? A little kid, trying to play the hero. The voice was rumbly, like the sound of boulders and rocks tumbling down from a mountain. Izuku looked up, catching the man's eye. He smirked wickedly, his muscles bulging and eyes burning with a hatred that only came with the high of trigger puller. He obviously had a strength enhancement quirk, from the size of him, himself, and his muscles. He grabbed Izuku by the throat, once again restricting his breathing, as he threw him into the wall of a building. Since Izuku was also enhanced, he ended up harshly crashing through the brick wall, his body breaking more as he sailed through it. His eyes brightened with the injury, vision sharpening and world feeling as if it had almost slowed completely. Izuku hauled himself back up, blood rapidly pouring from his new head wound, and snarled, baring his teeth at the villain. Izuku ran forwards and gave a punch. It didn't even move the man, he just laughed down at Izuku, grabbed his arm and snapped it. Izuku raised his head and made eye contact with the man again, eyes now as bright as a floodlight, almost blinding, and gave him a feral smile with all of his teeth showing. The man paused as if he were shocked. Izuku punched again with his broken arm, and this time, the man stumbled backwards. He looked shocked and then his face warped into a sadistic grin as Izuku was grabbed by 2 hands from behind. That was a mistake, little boy. Good luck with my friend's emotion manipulation quirk, she'll make you so afraid you won't be able to move. Fear flooded Izuku's body, but he kept smiling through it. Thank God fear triggered adrenaline. And Izuku could have sworn there was only 3 people attacking, so where had the 4th come from? You know, Izuku's voice was loud, it was as if he caught the attention of everyone that was on site. I'm an informant and vigilante called Adrenaline, you should really try to analyze someone before you fight them. With those words, and a kick and a punch, the fight was over. The other 2 people had been captured during Izuku's fight by the other heroes on scene, thank Kami. Izuku's body shook violently as he swayed, his body thrumming and glowing as if it were the sun. Adrenaline! Hey kid! Izuku swiveled around, catching Eraserhead's eyes. Sheet. I've needed to get out of here like, yesterday. Izuku immediately shot off, his quirk being the only thing that was keeping him standing at that current point, and ran all the way back to the apartment, once again using the fire escape to aid him into getting inside. Izuku collapsed into his mini nest on his bed, curling up into a ball and got himself comfortable for a night of staying awake, if the anxiety he was feeling decided to stay around. Izuku closed his eyes tightly and prayed he would just fall asleep. But he knew the only thing he would be thinking about that night was the man who didn't make it, but yet Izuku did. Izuku didn't fall asleep, so much as pass out if anything. And he definitely did pass out. As soon as his quirk wore off and the pain hit, he was gone for. He woke up again around about noon, his entire body aching. Thankfully he did actually end up getting up to get cleaned off and patched up as much as he could and made sure his sheets were cleaned from the blood and acid. Though there were a couple of small holes in his fluffy blankets now. He was pretty bummed out about that, to be honest. Izuku reached over and grabbed his phone, turning it on and immediately going on to his Hero News app to see if anything was documented about last night's attack, only to freeze up as he sees that Heroes Mag, easily the most popular magazine for hero news and just anything about heroes, had published an article. He shakily clicked onto it, butterflies fluttering in his stomach. Just in. Newest vigilante, Adrenaline, saves 40 in violent villain attack. Read more? Izuku stared at the news headline, eyes shifting out of focus and glazing over, chest tight with anxiety. People know who I am now. This is completely fine, right? He whispered breathlessly. His head felt like it was swimming and he felt dizzy, even though he was still laying down in bed. He scrolled through the article and then clicked out of it. It was just a summary of what happened and what he did. They even said he did a good job. That was at least good, right? Izuku refreshed the page and then even more articles about him popped up. He ended up reading every single one of them. Some of them were similar to the first, talking about what happened. Some of them were more on the interview side, people talking about how he had saved them. And then there were the other ones. Hateful words written, saying that he made the situation so much worse and that he should get arrested and thrown into jail. Izuku groaned and flopped back into his pillows and blankets, his phone dropping into his blankets with a dull thump as he rubbed his eyes with his free hands. Then, the pain in Izuku's body registered. His chest and throat burned fiercely, along with his skin, which was ruddy and peeling everywhere. His eyes also were stinging, his rubbing making them feel even worse. Izuku's right arm was bent at a wrong angle, pain lacing through it every time he so much as twitched. He tried to turn his body around to assess it more only for his body to seize up in pain. Oh yeah, he did get thrown through a wall last night. He pulled up his shirt and his entire torso was covered in dark purple, almost to the point it looked black, bruises, and his torso was also littered with gashes and cuts. Izuku's head pounded and his vision also felt tinted and blurry, everything taking a couple seconds to register. All right. Not much I can do about most of this. Izuku took his time patching himself up, cleaning his acid burns with cool water and then splinting his arm. He also took his time cleaning and bandaging all of his open injuries, not wanting to irritate his skin more than it already was at that point. Izuku cleaned away all of his supplies and turned his head, eyes catching himself in the mirror. His body looked thin, almost frail. Dark bags under his eyes that were puffy and slightly swollen. His body, that he could currently see, was littered with scars, far too many of them self-inflicted. Izuku's eyes were dull, almost lifeless, and that's the thought that made him remember and made the dam break. His heart lurched into his throat as different dull and lifeless eyes flashed through his head, the cold seeping from the unmoving body. Izuku choked on a sob, shaking hands coming up to cover his mouth in hopes to silence his own cries and sobs. He wasn't fast enough. Wasn't good enough. It was all his fault that that man is dead now. He was just trying to have a good night out, probably with friends or family, and now they'll be mourning his loss because Izuku wasn't good enough. He became a vigilante to save people, but what was the point if he was bad at it? Those other articles were right. He deserved to be caught and arrested, thrown into a jail cell for the rest of his pitiful and shitty life. He really was a villain. That was the thought that truly broke him. His legs buckled beneath him and he just let himself fall, his ugly cries and sobs painful in his throat and chest. Izuku pressed his hands closer and tighter against his mouth and nose, the world tilting and spinning from the lack of oxygen. His vision started to go dark, black spots appearing, until he heard a door slam and an angry yell. "You effing brat! Get your butt through here!" Inko's tone was angry and sharp. Izuku shivered, his quirk fighting to activate through his adrenaline. He consciously tried to slow down his heart rate and make himself more presentable, wiping at his red eyes and throwing on an oversized present mic jumper once again. He couldn't bring himself to wear his All Might merch as much as he used to. That doesn't mean he won't wear it though. All Might is still a good hero that Izuku respected. Just no longer worshipped. Izuku pulled the jumper over his hands, covering them up even though he had put on his gloves. He slid out of his room and into the living area, where his mother stood, foot tapping and very obviously angry. "What is this?" A newspaper slammed down on the worn-down dining room table, the slap echoing in the barren apartment. Izuku peeked at the newspaper, freezing at the picture of his own unruly green hair, flattened down and heavy with acidic sludge water, his mask squint on his face, showing off constellation-like freckles, and blood covering his skin. Izuku froze and looked back up at Inko. I don't know? What are you talking about?" Inko snarled at him, hands slamming down on the table. "Don't bullshit me, you brat. You know dim and well what I'm talking about." She hissed, "Who the hell do you think you are, some sort of hero? You'll never amount to anything, especially with that villainous quirk of yours. You're just playing hero. Look, someone even died. You aren't good enough, you couldn't save them, so quit whilst you're ahead. All you will even be is useless." Izuku's eyes welled up with tears and he bit his lip hard, blood seeping into his mouth. That's not true. I got into you, mum. I can be a hero." Izuku clenched his fist, mouth screwing up into a shaky and pained smile that looked much more like a grimace more than anything. Inko laughed, sharp and hollow. "So what? It's just Gen Ed. The most you'll amount to there is being so troublesome that you'll end up expelled." Izuku clenched his jaw, anger taking over the hurt. "No, actually. I'm in the hero course, top scorer of the year. I'm going to be a hero and prove all of you wrong. You can't stop me." Izuku raised his chin. Inko's face darkened. "Don't talk to me like that, young man. Treat your mother with respect. And like I said, you'll end up expelled on the first day. You have no chance in this world with a quirk like yours." Inko laughed again, her tone venomous, her eyes cold. "If you can treat me how you do, then I can talk to you however the hell I want. If anyone's a villain, it's you." Inko froze. She looked up at Izuku slowly, bloodlust soaking into the air. "How dare you?" With her words, Izuku could feel her quirk activating, plates and cups and cupboard doors rattling. With a sharp snap, Izuku gasped in pain, his right pointer finger snapping. "You will not speak to me like that." Another snap, his middle finger broken and purple. "I am nothing like a villain." His ring finger. "You are the only villain in this house." His pinky. "You ruined my life." His thumb. "I should have never let your father talk me into having children." His left pointer. "I should have just killed you the day you were born." All his remaining fingers snapped at once, Izuku crying out. In pain as he clutched both hands to his chest, tears falling. A glass came flying out the cupboard, smashing into the side of his head, glass falling everywhere. Inko picked up the shards and shot them towards Izuku, and all he could do was stand there in shock, and the glass penetrated deep into his skin. Izuku screwed his eyes closed, the front door slamming shut as he leaned against the wall and slowly slumped to the ground. His eyes, when he opened them, cast the entire room into an eerie green glow, his skin glowing a gentle yellow. Izuku pressed his lips together to try to quiet his cries. He sat there for what felt like hours but eventually started to lift himself up, trying to not irritate his new wounds. Even if he can't feel them because of his quirk right now, he didn't want them to hurt even more when it wore off. He spent the next few hours blinking in and out of awareness. Each time he came back to the real world his wounds would be more fixed up than the last, until eventually, they were all cleaned up and stabilized and he passed out. Shota sighed and tapped his pen against the stack of papers he had on his new first years and bit his lip as he scanned over each one's file. Hizashi kept sending him assessing looks from across the couch. Shota caught his eye and raised his eyebrow at him. What? Hizashi hummed and slid across the couch next to him, pressing their thighs together. You're worried about adrenaline, aren't you? Shota tissed at him, rolling his eyes. I'm not worried. He missed our last meeting and I haven't heard from him since what happened. He's probably kicking himself because of what happened. And the media certainly isn't helping. Hizashi gave him a sad smile and tilted his head. Yeah. Doesn't mean you're not worried though. You've basically adopted the kid. You're such a dad, Sho. Hizashi teased with a smile. Shota rolled his eyes and nudged Hizashi, which prompted his husband to curl his arm around Shota's shoulders and give him a noisy kiss on the cheek. Shota looked back down at the student files. He had reached the final one before Hizashi had distracted him, Izuku Midoriya, and looked at the quirk description. Pain reflection,